Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Late one night, Captain Declan Hawthorne crept to his own living room window, heart pounding from the shock of what he saw. His wife, Emily, stood by the hearth, her laughter mingling with the smooth voice of Pierce Lennox, Declan's closest friend. Through the glass, he overheard Pierce's triumphant whisper, "We did it. $1 million. No one suspects a thing." Confusion burned into fury as Declan realized that in the eyes of the world, he was already dead, and they were celebrating his death benefits. Torn between heartbreak and vengeance, he vowed to expose their shocking betrayal, no matter the ultimate cost. Before we dive into the full story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying this tale, don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Chapter 1. A sliver of moonlight cast the desert in pale silver, revealing a stretch of rocky terrain in northern Syria. Declan Hawthorne, captain in the U.S. Army Special Forces, crouched behind a fractured stone ledge. The night air was stifling, laced with dust and tension. "We can't hold this position forever," murmured Sergeant Frey, glancing at Declan with sweat trickling down his temple. Declan, intense hazel eyes fixed on the horizon, responded quietly, "Just a few more seconds. We need the coordinates." A faint beep from his handheld device indicated an incoming satellite ping, but as he tried to read it, a massive explosion ripped the night sky. The ground shook violently, and bits of debris rained down around them. "Incoming mortar!" Sergeant Frey shouted, diving behind a collapsed wall. Declan cursed under his breath. "We're compromised! Fall back to the vehicles!" In the chaos, Declan's team scattered. Insurgents advanced with chilling speed, muzzle flashes illuminating the otherwise moonlit surroundings. Declan sprinted for the second Humvee, bullets ricocheting off the armor plating. He could hear his radio crackle with fragmented calls for backup, but interference made it impossible to coordinate. Then a deafening blast swallowed him. The force hurled Declan backward, slamming him into a twisted hunk of metal. Pain streaked through his back. His vision blurred, he struggled to remain conscious. Vaguely, he sensed the scuffle of boots and desperate shouts from his men, but everything faded into swirling darkness. When Declan came to, he was lying on a makeshift cot inside a dimly lit structure. The scent of antiseptic stung his nostrils, mixed with the pungent smell of sweat and old earth. A Kurdish field medic leaned over him, checking an IV drip. Outside, sunlight creeped through bullet-riddled walls, revealing a battered corridor. "Your unit? Where are they?" the medic asked in broken English. Declan rasped, "Scattered. Did you find any others?" The medic shook his head solemnly. "Only you." Days bled into weeks. Information was scarce. Communication lines were destroyed, and the region was crawling with hostile patrols. While Declan healed from fractured ribs and a concussion, he learned the U.S. Army had declared their Special Forces unit as either captured or killed. He had no means to prove otherwise. Half a world away, stateside, Emily Hawthorne was notified of his presumed death. The formal letter arrived with a folded flag. The heartbreak spread quickly among friends and family, culminating in a tearful memorial service. On a crisp morning in suburban Virginia, Emily Hawthorne stood at her kitchen counter, staring at the notification from the insurance company. Her face was pale, but not from sorrow. Her hands trembled with an energy that was closer to excitement than grief. "Did you see the total amount?" she whispered into her phone, speaking to Pierce Lennox, Declan's old friend. Pierce's voice was smooth. "I did. $1 million? That's quite a sum, Em?" She exhaled, cheeks flushing. For a moment, guilt flickered in her eyes. She'd once loved her husband deeply, but time and distance had changed things. The letter acknowledging Declan as KIA meant the payout from the life insurance policy was already being fast-tracked. "We should, keep things quiet for now," Emily said. "At least until after the funeral." Pierce chuckled softly. "Of course. We'll do it tastefully." Tasteful. Right. Emily tried to swallow down the lump in her throat. A swirling conflict of relief, greed, and leftover love for Declan battled inside her, but she had come too far with Pierce's careful orchestration. No turning back now. Meanwhile, Declan's health improved under the watchful care of the Kurdish fighters who had rescued him. He owed them his life, and he repaid them by offering tactical advice, helping them defend their makeshift clinic. The desert nights were long and unrelenting, giving him endless hours to stare at the stars and think of home. "I have to get back," he confided in a Kurdish commander, Commander Barat. "My wife needs to know I'm alive." Barat patted his shoulder. "We do what we can. There is a supply convoy rumored to pass near the Turkish border in 2 weeks. If we can get you that far, you might find transport." Declan's mind raced with possibilities, reactivating his military credentials, proving his identity, letting Emily know he was safe. The thought of reuniting with her fueled his resolve. He didn't suspect betrayal, only the normal heartbreak that must have befallen her upon hearing he was gone. In a well-kept cemetery stateside, an arrangement of white lilies and the folded American flag signified the final farewell to Captain Declan Hawthorne. Soldiers from his unit who hadn't deployed to Syria performed a crisp, somber salute. Family members wept softly. "He was a true American hero," eulogized the commanding officer. "We honor his service and sacrifice." Emily stood at the front, black dress clinging to her slender frame. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, ignoring the faint sense of discomfort that coiled in her stomach. Pierce stood at her side, an expression of practiced solemnity on his handsome face. "You're handling this well," Pierce whispered to her, gently wrapping an arm around her waist. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the casket symbolically empty. No remains found. "If they only knew," she muttered under her breath. Pierce pressed his lips into a tight line. "Stay calm. Let's get through this." In the gathered crowd, a few older neighbors frowned, noticing how Pierce's hand lingered a bit too long on Emily's hip. But no one dared question it on such a day of mourning. Shortly after the funeral, the insurance payout landed. Emily stared at the bold figure on her statement. USD 1,000,000. The weight of it was staggering. She tried to remind herself it was blood money. But Pierce had a different perspective. "This is freedom," he told her with a grin, swirling a glass of scotch in his condo. "With the right investments, we're set for life." Emily fiddled with her diamond bracelet, a recent gift purchased with a fraction of the payout. She exhaled. "We just need to be careful. People might talk if we splurge too soon." Pierce shrugged. "We'll keep up appearances. Mourning widow, supportive friend, nobody will suspect a thing." Unbeknownst to them, halfway across the world, Declan was already drafting a plan to travel stateside, determined to surprise Emily with his miraculous survival. 2 grueling weeks later, Declan found himself crammed in the back of a supply truck heading north. From there, a Turkish liaison helped him secure forged documents to cross the border. Eventually, he managed to contact a distant relative in Germany who wired him funds for a plane ticket. "I'm coming home, Emily," Declan thought, staring at the airplane seat in front of him, mind racing. "Just hold on." He had no illusions it would be easy. The Army had him listed as KIA, so there would be bureaucratic hurdles. But the love for his wife and the need to reassure her overshadowed all else. He could already imagine the tears of joy upon seeing him alive. If only he knew. While Emily busied herself redecorating her home, trying to fill the empty space left by Declan's memory, Pierce used his inside knowledge as an insurance broker to expedite a few more claims. He had discovered a blueprint for manipulating certain high-risk soldier policies. Declan's was the biggest payout yet, but it wasn't the first time Pierce had tested these waters. "I've got a new lead," he boasted to Emily one evening. "Another family, combat zone casualty. We could assist the widow in filing quickly and—" Emily cut him off. "I'm not sure I want to do that again. It feels morally wrong." Pierce raised an eyebrow, snorting a laugh. "Since when did that matter? Don't tell me you've grown a conscience." She shifted uncomfortably. "It's just, Declan truly was my husband. I can't keep doing this to other families." Pierce's voice turned cold. "Suit yourself. But don't forget I carried half the risk when we expedited your payout. If anything goes wrong, we're both in deep." Emily glared, but remained silent. She was torn, half enthralled by the money and half haunted by Declan's memory. She consoled herself with the repeated lie that he was truly gone. That was the only way she could sleep at night. 3 months after that fateful ambush in Syria, Declan's plane touched down at Washington Dulles Airport under a stormy evening sky. He'd lost weight, sporting a trimmed beard and faint scars from his injuries. With no official ID recognized by the system, he found trouble at immigration, but a sympathetic officer allowed him entry after verifying partial fingerprint records from his military file. "Captain Hawthorne," the officer said, scanning his face, "we have you listed as deceased, sir." Declan forced a weary smile. "Believe me, I'd like to rectify that." He stepped outside into the damp Virginia air, an unexpected wave of homesickness coursing through him. This was his land, the place he risked his life to defend. To be mistaken for a dead man on paper was surreal. Yet he felt a hopeful anticipation building he would soon hold Emily in his arms, prove that love conquers distance and adversity. Little did he know, a far more devastating ambush awaited him at home. Late that night, Declan stood at the end of his street gazing at the warm glow emanating from his house. A wave of emotion hit him. Gratitude to be alive, sorrow for the men he'd lost, and relief that he'd soon be reunited with his wife. And then he saw the sleek, unfamiliar sedan in his driveway Pierce's. Shadows moved behind the curtains. He advanced carefully, curiosity turning to suspicion. The laughter he heard within wasn't the laughter of mourning. It was celebratory, light, and disturbingly intimate. "Emily," he whispered to the silent darkness. "What the hell is going on?" His heart pounded as he approached the window, bracing himself for the scene unfolding inside. He had survived gunfire and mortar shells, had endured the living hell of captivity and injury. But nothing could have prepared him for the betrayal taking shape behind that glass pane. Chapter 2. Declan's hands trembled with adrenaline as he carefully peeked through the partially open curtain. In the cozy living room, he saw Emily wearing a satin robe, a champagne flute in hand, her face flushed with excitement. Standing beside her, equally relaxed, was Pierce Lennox. He was in a tailored suit, swirling a second glass of bubbly. Pierce chuckled. "We've used almost half of that $1 million on the Bali trip, the car, and the new business venture. But trust me, Emily, it's only the beginning." Emily gave a playful scoff. "Half already? God, we're reckless. But hey, we deserve it, especially after everything." Declan felt a surge of nausea. It was as though his insides had been hollowed out. This wasn't just two friends having a drink. This was intimacy, complicity. The mention of $1 million rattled his brain. He knew he had life insurance, but that high a figure? Emily sighed, leaning on Pierce. Can't believe it was this easy. Expediting the claim. No one asked too many questions. Pierce smirked. That's because I know exactly how to phrase these things. My experience at the firm has always been handy. Declan could barely breathe. She had claimed his death benefits, and they were discussing it so casually, so callously. The blinds parted enough for him to see Pierce press a hand on Emily's waist, whispering something that made her giggle. Shaking off the initial shock, Declan felt a dark anger coalesce in his chest. He refused to burst in blindly, but some primal part of him demanded immediate answers. Quietly, he tried the front door handle locked. Summoning his training, he tested a side window. It gave a fraction of an inch. Within moments, he was inside, stepping carefully across the living room threshold. Emily's back was turned as she exclaimed, "Pierce, do you realize this means we can—" Then her gaze snagged on a figure in the corner. Emily shrieked, dropping her champagne flute, shards scattering across the hardwood floor. Pierce whirled around, color draining from his face. Declan stood there, dusty boots, worn jacket, a hardened expression that might have made even the toughest insurgent flinch. "Surprised to see a dead man, Emily?" Declan's tone was ice, his voice low but lethal. Pierce actually stumbled backward, almost tripping on the coffee table. Emily's hands covered her mouth, her eyes wide as saucers. "Declan!" she stammered. "How? Oh my God!" The tension was suffocating. The air crackled with shock and guilt. Declan let the silence stretch, never taking his eyes off them. "This has to be some sort of horrible prank," Pierce finally blurted, trying to regain composure. "We were told you died in Syria." Emily's voice wobbled. "Yes. The army said you were KIA. We had a funeral." Declan nearly spat. "Really? You had a funeral?" His gaze flicked to the folded flag on the mantel. "How nice of you to bury me so quickly." He saw Emily's lips tremble. Her eyes darted to Pierce for support, but Pierce was too stunned to offer any. The tension in the room felt thicker than the walls themselves. I can explain," Emily tried, stepping forward. "We truly believed—" Declan cut her off, raising a hand. "Don't." He glanced around at the luxury touches, the new furniture, the pricey electronics. The entire living room had been redecorated. The weight of betrayal pressed against his lungs, but he refused to show weakness. Desperate, Emily stepped closer, tears sparkling in her eyes. "Declan, I'm sorry. You have no idea what it was like to be told you'd never come home. I was devastated." Pierce cleared his throat. "We should talk somewhere private. This is obviously a misunderstanding, buddy." Declan's icy stare pinned him. "Buddy? Don't buddy me, Pierce." He inhaled to calm the rage swirling in his chest. For a fleeting moment, he remembered the nights in training camp with Pierce, how they were nearly inseparable. The memory turned sour now. Emily tried again, voice trembling. "Declan, we can fix this. We just need to sit down and—" Declan let out a cold, mirthless laugh. "Fix it? From where I'm standing, everything looks pretty damn broken." He refused to indulge the swirling excuses. With a rigid posture, he stepped around the shattered glass on the floor, ignoring Pierce's half-hearted attempt to block his path. "Stay out of my way," Declan hissed. Pierce stammered. "Look, we're both in shock. You can't just vanish for months and then—" Declan turned on him with lethal composure. "I was missing in a war zone." "What's your excuse?" Pierce's jaw snapped shut. In the hush that followed, Emily's soft sob was the only sound. Declan clenched his fists, glancing at them both one last time. "You have no idea how gone I can be," he said quietly, eyes brimming with a furious promise. Then he brushed past them, disappearing into the dark Virginia night. Emily sank to her knees, shaking, while Pierce stood motionless. Neither of them realized how drastically their world had just changed. Outside, a cold drizzle coated Declan's face as he stalked down the quiet street. Houses were dark, neighbors asleep. The thick hush of betrayal weighed on his shoulders. He felt an odd emptiness, a numbness that was worse than any physical wound he'd endured. "They took my death benefits," he whispered aloud, the reality hitting him like a sledgehammer. "They spent it. They replaced me. And they looked comfortable." His mind reeled. Part of him wanted to confront them again, to demand the truth, demand restitution. But instinct told him to strategize, to gather intel. Rushing in with raw anger would only complicate matters. He was a soldier, after all, trained to analyze, plan, and strike when the enemy was most vulnerable. That night, he found a cheap motel off the highway. The clerk gave him a suspicious look at first, but Declan showed a battered military ID card that was barely legible. "Rough night?" the clerk asked, handing him a room key. Declan forced a grim smile. "You could say that." He sank onto the motel bed, phone pressed to his ear, but discovered it was deactivated. Emily must have canceled the plan months ago. With no direct line to the army, he was left to rely on old contacts. He scrolled through his phone's offline contacts, eventually finding the name Ramon Alvarez. "If anyone can help me unravel this mess, it's Ramon," Declan muttered. Ramon, an ex-FBI agent who specialized in white-collar crime, had once assisted Declan with a background check for a security job. They weren't close friends, but he was a man who knew how to handle complicated legal issues. And if there was ever a complication, this was it. Sleep wouldn't come easily. Declan's mind churned with images. Emily's face, glowing under the lamplight, Pierce's confident grin, the talk of half the money spent. He remembered the days he had counted Emily as his anchor, the sweet calls before his deployments, her proud smile at his promotion ceremony. All of it now felt like a carefully staged illusion. He flicked on the motel TV to drown out his thoughts. A news segment showed footage of continuing conflicts overseas. He stared at the screen, numb to the anchor's voice, thinking about the men he lost in Syria, about how he nearly died for a country that now believed him dead, about how he fought to return, only to find his home had turned into a stage for betrayal. "I'm not letting them get away with this," he whispered into the empty room, eyes steeled with conviction. "They wanted me declared dead? Fine. Let them think the ghost of Declan Hawthorne is coming for them." Chapter 3. Morning light seeped through the thin motel curtains. Declan rubbed his temples, exhaustion and anger warring inside him. The pit in his stomach felt deeper now that the shock had settled. He rummaged through his bag, finding enough cash for coffee and a payphone call. 6:45 a.m. He stood at a coin-operated phone by a 7-Eleven, the receiver pressed to his ear. "Ramon Alvarez, who's asking?" came a measured, cool voice. Declan exhaled, relief edging in. "Ramon, it's Declan Hawthorne." A pause. Then, "Declan, from the Army? Holy hell, man. Word was you died overseas." "So I've heard," Declan replied dryly. They agreed to meet at a small diner on the outskirts of town. Ramon was already seated in a booth when Declan arrived. A tall, lean man in his late 40s, with sharp eyes hinting at a methodical mind. Ramon stood up, grasping Declan's hand firmly. "Look at you. Back from the dead." Declan managed a tight smile. "I'd prefer fewer Lazarus jokes, but yeah, here I am." They settled into the booth. Declan recounted everything in a subdued tone: Syria, the injury, the extended MIA, returning home to find Emily and Pierce living off his insurance. Ramon listened without interruption, occasionally jotting notes in a small leather notebook. "This is bigger than just a wife cheating," Ramon observed after a while. From what you're describing, Pierce leveraged his position to fast-track your death benefits. Declan nodded, jaw clenched. He's an insurance broker. Clearly, he knew how to exploit the system. And Emily was complicit? Declan's eyes flared at the memory of her with that champagne flute. Absolutely. The funeral, the check, the new car she was in on it. Ramon tapped his pen against the table, thinking. Two immediate concerns. One, you're legally dead. Two, they've presumably committed insurance fraud. If you want to reclaim your life and hold them accountable, we'll need official steps. Declan leaned forward. Ramon, how do I do that? The Army has me on file as KIA. The local government thinks I'm gone. And from the looks of it, they're not planning to set me back to a live status anytime soon. Ramon shrugged. It'll be messy, but not impossible. You'll need a lawyer, someone well-versed in military law. I know a sharp attorney named Rachel Myers. She's tough, patriotic, and hates insurance scammers with a passion. Declan felt a pang of gratitude. Whatever it takes, I'm ready. Ramon suggested they keep everything quiet for now, no direct confrontation with Emily or Pierce. Declan's instincts aligned with that. He needed to gather evidence, not just rage at them with righteous fury. Ramon raised a brow. You sure you can keep your cool? This is personal. Declan exhaled slowly, remembering the countless covert ops he'd led. I've been trained to keep my head under fire. This is no different. They parted ways with a plan. Ramon would contact Rachel Myers to set up a legal consultation under the radar. Meanwhile, Declan would operate as a ghost, collecting proof that Emily and Pierce intentionally defrauded the insurance company. Because once that's proven, they face serious federal charges. Across town, in the upscale neighborhood where Declan's home stood, Emily Hawthorne pretended to resume her daily routine. She wore a composed face as she stepped onto the porch to collect the mail. The house remained eerily quiet after last night's explosive confrontation. She clutched the mail to her chest, her mind swirling with a single question. What do we do now that Declan is alive? Pierce arrived in a hurry, parking his sleek sedan with a squeal of tires. He marched inside without knocking, finding Emily seated in the living room, staring blankly at the mantel where Declan's folded flag still rested. We need a plan, Pierce announced curtly. He's out there, Em. She looked up, eyes puffy from crying. I don't know what to do. Pierce paced. We can't let him just stroll into the insurance firm with proof he's alive. That triggers an investigation, Em, and we're screwed. Emily swallowed a lump in her throat. What are you saying? We hide from him? Threaten him? We can't exactly kill him off for real. Pierce's face grew dark. No, that would be insane. But maybe we pressure him legally. If he's considered dead, does he even have standing to sue or reclaim assets? Emily set the mail down, voice trembling. He's still my husband, Pierce. For God's sake, this is so twisted. Pierce jabbed a finger in her direction. You wanted that $1 million just as bad as I did. Don't go soft on me now. They bickered in hushed, frantic tones, neither of them prepared to face the unstoppable force that Declan, now very much alive, was about to become. That afternoon, Declan and Ramon pulled up to a modest brick office building on the outskirts of the city. A polished plaque read, Rachel Myers, Attorney at Law. Inside, the waiting area smelled of fresh coffee and new paper. A tall woman in her mid-30s with curly black hair emerged from a side office. Her sharp eyes swept over Declan and Ramon. Mr. Alvarez, I presume? She asked. Ramon nodded. Pleasure to see you again, Rachel. This is Captain Declan Hawthorne. Rachel's gaze fixed on Declan, and her eyebrows arched slightly. Captain Hawthorne? As in the KIA soldier from Syria? Declan offered a handshake. Yes, ma'am. hoping we can fix that label. In her office, an organized chaos of legal files surrounded them. Declan recounted his plight, the ambush, his rescue, the official death, and Emily's suspiciously swift insurance claim. Rachel took meticulous notes, occasionally asking pointed questions. "And you have proof your wife and Mr. Lennox are romantically involved?" she inquired. Declan's jaw tightened. "I saw them together, overheard them talking about the money, but I'll gather more." Rachel nodded. "Good, because for fraud, we need tangible evidence that they conspired to file a wrongful death claim knowing you were potentially still alive." She leaned back, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Captain, you have a major uphill battle, but I specialize in reactivating benefits for soldiers who were declared missing or dead under questionable circumstances. Let's just say I have a personal vendetta against insurance exploitation." Ramon smirked. "Told you she was the right one, Declan." They spent hours strategizing. Step 1. Confirm the status of Declan's Army records and attempt to reverse the KIA classification. Step 2. Investigate Pierce's actions at his insurance firm. Step 3. Document Emily's complicity bank statements, messages, notarized forms. Step 4. Confront them legally, ensuring a tight case so they can't wriggle free on technicalities. "And, Captain," Rachel cautioned, "do not have any direct contact with them unless absolutely necessary. We don't want them claiming harassment or using any conversation out of context." Declan exhaled. "Understood, but they know I'm alive. They'll be scrambling to cover their tracks." Ramon nodded. "All the more reason to move fast. We'll see if they slip up." Later that evening, as Declan left Rachel's office, he caught a local news segment on a TV in the hallway. It showed footage from a charity gala in town, ironically an event supporting veterans. Among the attendees were a well-dressed Emily and Pierce, smiling for cameras. The reporter's voiceover, "Emily Hawthorne, widow of fallen Army Captain Declan Hawthorne, is seen here with longtime family friend Pierce Lennox, celebrating the newly formed Soldiers' Hope Foundation." Declan stared at the screen in astonishment. Widow, family friend, celebrating. The audacity made him grit his teeth so hard he thought they'd crack. Pulling up to the neighborhood late at night in Ramon's car, Declan scanned the quiet street. Most lights were off. Suddenly, a door across the street opened, and a woman in her early 50s, wearing a robe and slippers, stepped onto her porch, peering curiously at them. She called softly, "Declan Hawthorne? That really you?" Declan froze. It was Carmen Morales, his neighbor since he first bought the house. She had known him and Emily for years. He motioned for Ramon to stay in the car and walked toward her porch. Carmen's eyes glistened with relief and confusion. "I thought you were—" "I went to your funeral," she whispered, stepping closer to examine his face. Declan nodded grimly. "So did everyone else, apparently. I'm sorry you had to go through that. It wasn't my choice." Carmen let out a shaky breath. "Lord Almighty." I had this feeling something was off about Emily and Pierce. She ushered Declan inside. The living room was cozy, cluttered with pictures of grandchildren and crocheted blankets. Ramon joined them quietly. Carmen opened a small wooden box and pulled out a USB flash drive. "I sometimes record with my porch camera, you know, just for neighborhood security." Emily and Pierce would often stand outside at weird hours, talking about finances. I overheard some suspicious stuff. Declan's heart pounded. "You recorded them?" She nodded, face flushed. "I'm not a snoop, I swear. But after the funeral, Pierce was here so often, and I saw them well. Let's just say it didn't look like two grieving friends. So I started saving the clips." She handed the flash drive to Declan. "Maybe it's none of my business. But if it can help, I want you to have it." Ramon exchanged a stunned glance with Declan. This could be gold. They viewed some footage on Carmen's laptop. In one clip from about a month ago, Pierce stood on Emily's porch popping a bottle of champagne. Emily giggled, brandishing a check in her hand. "We did it," Emily said, voice giddy. "1 million, baby, this is going to change everything." Pierce laughed, leaning in to kiss her neck. "We deserve to enjoy this, and no one suspects a thing." The date stamp was barely 2 weeks after the Army officially declared Declan KIA. Declan's hands balled into fists, knuckles white. He breathed through the burst of fury, forcing himself to remain calm. This was exactly the kind of evidence he needed. As they shut off the video, Carmen gave Declan a reassuring pat on the arm. "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve this." Declan swallowed, fighting the swirl of betrayal and heartbreak. "Thank you, Carmen. You've helped more than you know." Now, armed with actual recorded proof, he could see the path to dismantling Emily and Pierce's entire facade. They had played their hand, assumed the war had swallowed him forever. They had no clue that the dead man had come home to wage a war of his own. Chapter 4. The next night, Declan parked a borrowed sedan down the street from his own home. The plan: gather more intel without confrontation. Ramon had arranged a basic surveillance kit, tiny cameras, and audio bugs. Ramon's voice crackled in Declan's earpiece. "Remember, in and out. Don't linger. And if they show up, you ghost out." Declan nodded, stepping onto the lawn he used to mow on weekends. "Roger that." He bypassed the side gate, scanning for changes. The back door had a new lock, but he swiftly picked it. Inside, the place felt alien. The furniture was different, the walls repainted in trendy colors. Photos of Emily and Pierce on a beach mocked him from the mantel. "Damn, they wasted no time," he muttered, shaking his head in disgust. He moved methodically from room to room, placing tiny cameras behind decorative items. A small microphone in the living room, another near the front hallway. He found bank statements on a desk, envelopes from the insurance firm with Pierce's signature as the agent of record. "This could help prove he facilitated the fraudulent claim," Declan whispered. He snapped pictures with a digital camera. In the master bedroom, he froze at the sight of new linens, personal items that clearly belonged to Pierce. The closet door hung open, revealing men's shirts and suits that were definitely not his. Declan swallowed the bitterness, forcing himself not to dwell on the personal betrayal. Suddenly, headlights swept across the driveway. Declan felt a jolt of alarm. Ramon's voice in his earpiece. "Declan, a car just pulled up. Might be them." Declan cursed under his breath, quickly slipping into the shadows of the hallway. The front door creaked open. "I'm telling you, Emily, we should just call him." "Try to reason," Pierce's voice echoed through the foyer. Emily's tone was sharp. "Reason. With a man we declared dead and robbed blind. Brilliant." Declan pressed against the wall, listening to every word. From the living room's vantage point, they were only a few feet away. Pierce scoffed. "He was gone for months. Legally, we had every right to collect. The Army declared him dead." Emily's voice trembled slightly. "Deep down, I'm terrified. He's not going to let this go." Declan's pulse hammered, but he remained stone still. Emily flopped onto the couch, sighing. "We can't keep up this facade forever. People in the neighborhood talk. And what if the insurance company investigates? If Declan shows up at their office breathing and alive, we're finished." Pierce paced. "We can't let that happen. I have a contact in the firm who can stall any official changes to the policy if we spin some story about a bureaucratic error. But it's risky." Emily covered her face with her hands. "I hate living like this. It's like any day the rug will be pulled out from under us." Declan felt a flicker of satisfaction. Let them sweat. Pierce's voice dropped. "We might consider a legal strategy claim that we acted in good faith, that we truly believed he was dead. Hell, we can say the Army told us in person, then blame any wrongdoing on the bureaucratic system." Emily sniffled. "But what if Declan testifies against us?" Pierce paused. "We question his mental fitness, claim PTSD, he's been in a war zone, nearly died. We spin it like he's not stable." Declan's nostrils flared. They were planning to gaslight him, brand him psychologically unfit. The cruelty was breathtaking. Emily stood abruptly. "I need a shower, my nerves are shot." Declan seized the opportunity. Once Emily walked upstairs, Pierce went into the kitchen, rummaging for a bottle of wine. Declan crept closer, carefully placing a final bug near the staircase baseboard. Ramon's urgent whisper came through. "Time to exit, buddy. Don't push your luck." Declan exhaled, then made a silent retreat to the back door. He slipped out into the backyard, heart pounding, hearing Pierce's footsteps behind him closer than comfortable. But he managed to vanish into the night just as Pierce flicked on the back porch light. Declan reconvened with Ramon at a discreet location, a friend's empty garage. They played back the newly captured audio. The clarity was excellent, each word revealing Pierce's arrogance and Emily's fear. Rachel was on speakerphone. "This is gold. If they're openly discussing strategies to dodge accountability, we can show they're acting with malice, not just ignorance." Ramon nodded. "We've enough for probable cause. We might be able to get the feds interested in an insurance fraud case, especially if we suspect Pierce has done this before with other soldiers." Declan stared at the floor, wrestling with the swirl of emotions. It was surreal, turning love and marriage into a legal game of cat-and-mouse. But the more he learned, the more he realized Emily and Pierce had meticulously planned this from the start. The next day, Rachel set up a meeting with an Army liaison to start the official process of reversing Declan's KIA status. It wasn't a simple matter of walking into an office and proclaiming, "I'm alive." There were forms, interviews, and verifications. The Army was stunned by the revelation. The liaison, a lieutenant colonel, gave Declan a solemn salute. "Welcome home, Captain. We'll expedite this as much as possible." Declan managed a half-smile. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." But the truth was, Emily and Pierce had already cashed out everything. Even if the Army reinstated him, the money was gone. The trust shattered. Back at the motel, Declan found himself wide awake past midnight, replaying the day's events. Emily's tearful face, Pierce's smug tone, and the realization that they intended to paint him as unstable. How dare they? "They wanted me dead," he muttered. "Fine, let them see what it means when a dead man fights back." He jotted a to-do list on a notepad. "Lock down legal counsel, Rachel. Check. Build an undeniable evidence trail. Carmen's video, the new audio recordings. Check. Prove other victims, possibly exposing a larger fraud ring involving Pierce. Maintain composure. Avoid direct emotional showdowns." The last point was crucial. He'd spent a lifetime learning discipline under the harshest conditions. He refused to let anger sabotage the methodical plan. A memory flashed. That day, exactly a year ago, he'd celebrated his wedding anniversary with Emily. They'd danced in the living room, giggling like teenagers. She'd told him she loved him, that she'd wait forever. The ache in his chest was a reminder of how quickly everything had turned sour. Was it ever real? Declan asked the silent walls. Or was I just blind? He suspected the affair had begun months before his deployment, perhaps longer. The phone logs and suspicious bank records would eventually reveal the deeper truth. For now, he fed that heartbreak into his sense of purpose. Rachel called bright and early the next morning. I have some updates, Captain. We can move on an injunction freezing any further disbursement from that insurance policy, pending review. And I've contacted a colleague at the FBI about potential multiple fraud cases with Pierce. Declan let out a slow breath. That's good. I want them cornered. Rachel hesitated. I know you want justice, but we must do this by the book. No vigilante stunts that could compromise the case. Understood, Declan replied. But in his mind, there were no lengths he wouldn't go to if it meant ensuring Pierce and Emily faced the full weight of their betrayal. Outside, the day was bright, the streets bustling with ordinary life. Declan found it jarring that everyone else seemed so normal, while his world was a swirling hurricane of betrayal and legal maneuvers. He sipped a takeout coffee, ignoring the pang of hunger. Vengeance was more potent than any meal. He pictured Emily's face, the tears, the guilt, and ultimately the self-preservation. Then Pierce's smug countenance, that smirk that had once been a friend's grin. They had orchestrated a funeral for him, spent the money, possibly even laughed at how naive he was to trust them. It won't be enough to ruin them, Declan thought. I need to make sure they can never do this to anyone else. The silent vow echoed in his mind. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the men who truly died in Syria, for the honor of soldiers who might also have unscrupulous individuals waiting to profit from their demise. This betrayal was personal, but the ramifications were bigger than him. One thing was certain. The Hawthorne name wouldn't remain in a coffin. He'd reclaim his life. And Emily and Pierce would regret underestimating the soldier who refused to stay buried. Chapter 5. The crisp morning air smelled faintly of burnt coffee as Rachel Myers sat at her desk, poring over a stack of legal documents. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, illuminating the tension etched on her features. She'd been up half the night, coordinating with Ramon Alvarez and patching together the labyrinth of evidence Declan had gathered against Emily and Pierce. The more she read, the more she realized this wasn't just a simple fraud plus adultery scenario. It had the makings of a scandal that could rock the insurance industry if they uncovered multiple fraudulent military death claims beyond Declan's own. Rachel stretched her neck, trying to relieve the knot of stress. She was fiercely determined to see justice done for Declan, partly because she respected the sacrifices of soldiers, but also due to her deep-seated disdain for white-collar criminals who preyed on service members' vulnerabilities. There was a personal angle, too. Her older brother had served and died under suspicious circumstances in a different conflict. And though his case was never proven fraudulent, she still harbored guilt for not unearthing the truth in time. Now, in Declan, she saw a chance to right some cosmic scale of injustice. She tapped a finger on a phone message from a Department of Defense liaison. Captain Declan Hawthorne's status correction request has been flagged for urgent review, the note read. Good, Rachel muttered, picking up her coffee mug. We need that official correction. The second the Army acknowledges him as living, the insurance claim becomes indefensible. Just then, her phone buzzed. Ramon was on the line. She flicked the phone to speaker. Morning, Rachel, he greeted, voice a touch groggy. We might have a problem. She closed her eyes, bracing herself. Lay it on me. Pierce and Emily are lawyering up. I've heard from a contact that Pierce reached out to one of the top defense attorneys in the state, someone well-versed in defamation and civil suits. They might attempt to go on the offensive. Rachel let out a slow breath. We knew this was coming. Let's not panic. Declan is gathering evidence legally. They can't spin a simple harassment narrative that easily. Ramon paused. They may try to get a restraining order against him to keep him from exposing them further. Rachel's jaw tensed. Let them try. If they do, we'll challenge it with the truth he's a victim of fraud, not a perpetrator. She ended the call with a new wave of determination. If Pierce and Emily wanted to drag them into a legal slugfest, so be it. She'd been waiting her whole career to take down predators like them. Over at Pierce Lennox's upscale condo, the morning was considerably less calm. He paced across the polished hardwood floors, phone pressed to his ear. The condo was newly furnished, mostly courtesy of the insurance money, and the sleek modern decor did little to soothe his roiling anxiety. "Why haven't we heard anything from the firm?" Pierce demanded, speaking to an insurance associate named Owen Truscott, a mid-level manager who had helped expedite Declan's false death claim. Owen's voice crackled on the line. "I'm doing everything I can, Pierce, but rumors are swirling that Captain Hawthorne is well alive." Pierce squeezed his eyes shut. "Yes, I'm aware. For the millionth time, can we freeze the records? Delay any official update?" "I can try, but this is a ticking time bomb," Owen warned. "Once we confirm he's alive, the payout is automatically under fraud investigation. The compliance department is going to ask a lot of questions." "Stall them," Pierce barked. "I don't care how." He slammed the phone down, letting out a furious exhale. This was unraveling faster than he'd expected. That damn soldier had to show up alive, smashing their perfect plan. He used to pride himself on careful planning, but it appeared his arrogance had led him to cut corners. Now, he was perched precariously on the edge of ruin. Emily emerged from the bedroom, hair tousled, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. "Any news?" she asked softly. Pierce raked a hand through his hair. "Nothing good. If the Army corrects Declan's status, we're done. The insurance will investigate, the feds might get involved, this could turn criminal." She shuddered. "But we truly believed he was gone, right? The Army said so." "Sure," Pierce scoffed. "But everything else, us forging certain forms, expediting the claim beyond normal procedures, that's less easy to spin." Emily sank onto the couch, hugging a throw pillow. "What do we do, Pierce?" "We fight back," he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his own doubts. "We get a top-notch lawyer. Claim we acted in good faith. We smear Declan's mental stability if we must." Emily stared at the floor, memories of Declan flooding her mind. The day he left for basic training, the night he proposed under a starry sky, the tearful goodbyes before each deployment. Could she really go through with smearing him? She felt a pang of guilt so intense it nearly choked her. But the glint in Pierce's eyes left little room for sentimentality. They were entangled now, and there was no easy way out. Meanwhile, Declan Hawthorne sat in a dimly lit basement belonging to an old Army buddy, Marcus "Mac" Hadley, who'd offered him a discreet place to crash. Mac was overseas, so the house was vacant perfect for Declan's covert operations. A row of monitors displayed the interior of Declan's rightful home, courtesy of the small cameras he'd hidden. The feeds were static now, as neither Emily nor Pierce were there at the moment, but he'd recorded their previous night's conversation. He had hours of digital proof, from phone calls to confessions about forging claim details. Combined with Carmen's porch cam footage, they were building an unstoppable case. "You'll regret crossing me," he muttered, scrolling through the recordings. A beep signaled an incoming message from Rachel. He opened it, reading her briefing on the next legal steps and how the Army was expediting his reclassification. Declan's grip on the mouse tightened. Soon the world would know he was officially alive, which meant the cover for Emily and Pierce would crumble. But he also knew they'd ramp up their countermeasures. He needed to be one step ahead. He'd honed those instincts in combat. No reason to fail now. That afternoon, a knock on the basement door startled Declan. He approached carefully, a hand near the concealed firearm at his hip, old habits from a war zone. Through a side window, he spotted a familiar silhouette. Commander Barat, the Kurdish fighter who had saved his life in Syria, accompanied by a translator. They were unexpected visitors, but a wave of relief hit Declan. He opened the door. "Commander Barat," he greeted. "I never thought I'd see you here in the States." Barat, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes, offered a gentle smile. Through the translator, he said, "I'm visiting on behalf of our mutual allies. I wanted to ensure you made it home safely, and that you have what you need." Declan gestured them inside. Though resources were limited in that bare-bones basement, he offered chairs and water. "I owe you my life," Declan said in a low voice. "Without your people, I'd have bled out in that dusty clinic." Barat spoke through the translator, explaining that hearing of Declan's complicated situation, he used some back channels to come offer moral support, and possibly more. "They said you have been betrayed, that men and women at home conspired to profit from your death," Barat concluded, frowning deeply. Declan felt a surge of gratitude at this demonstration of loyalty from a man whose culture and homeland were so different from his own. Soldiers recognized each other beyond borders. "Thank you," Declan said, voice thick. "If there's anything—" Barat raised a hand. "We already gave you your life. This is your fight now. But if you need an extra witness to the fact that the army declared you missing with no confirmation of your death, I can testify. You were in our care the entire time." Declan nodded. "That could be invaluable in a court setting if it comes to that." Thus, a new alliance was forged. Declan felt a renewed sense of moral clarity. The bond of brotherhood in arms was real, in stark contrast to the shallow relationship he now realized he once had with Pierce. Trying to preserve some sense of normalcy, Emily visited her favorite coffee spot, Falcon Wing Cafe, in the center of town. A place where she used to go with Declan on lazy Sunday mornings. Now, the memory just made her anxious. She slid into a booth, waiting for an acquaintance, Lisa, who offered a sympathetic ear. While Emily stared at the swirling latte art, she felt a sudden hush fall over the cafe. She glanced up to see Carmen Morales by the pastry counter, giving her a distinctly disapproving look. Emily's stomach knotted. Did Carmen suspect? Hell, Carmen had been at the funeral and must have realized something was off about Emily and Pierce soon after. Their neighborhood was rife with rumors, and Carmen was known to pay attention. Carmen's eyes narrowed, but she offered no greeting. She purchased her coffee and left. Emily's phone buzzed, a message from Pierce. "Lawyer has a strategy. We'll fill you in." She inhaled shakily. Strategy, right? She needed something to calm her guilt, to allow her to rationalize the betrayal as a necessary step, because they genuinely believed Declan was gone. But every time she repeated that to herself, it felt hollow. The forging of certain documents to expedite the policy claim was irrefutable evidence of malicious intent. Suddenly, Lisa arrived and slid into the booth. Her eyes darted around, noticing Emily's pale face. "Everything okay, hun?" Lisa asked, concerned. Emily forced a tight smile. "Just stressed. The grieving widow role is exhausting." Lisa's brow furrowed. "It's been months. You can take a break." Emily laughed bitterly, stirring her latte too vigorously. "If only you knew how complicated it all is." Lisa might have probed further, but Emily changed the subject, trying to mask her turmoil. On her drive home, though, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in, especially with Carmen watching her every move. Later that day, Pierce and Emily sat in a lavish conference room within an upscale law firm. Their newly hired attorney, Genevieve Parks, was a formidable figure, salt and pepper hair, an impeccably tailored suit, and a reputation for defending corporate bigwigs with cunning. Genevieve studied them through steely eyes. "I've reviewed what you sent. The insurance documents, the timeline. This is potentially catastrophic." Pierce cleared his throat. "We're prepared to fight." Genevieve drummed her manicured nails on the table. "Let me be blunt. If Captain Hawthorne can prove you knowingly filed an insurance claim while aware he was not truly confirmed dead, you're facing felony fraud charges, possibly conspiracy." Emily pressed her lips together. "We did believe he was gone." "The Army's official statements will matter," Genevieve conceded. "But I see you fast-track the claim using special connections. That's suspicious. Plus, you spent a large chunk of the money quickly." Pierce shrugged, feigning casualness. "We just wanted to move on. People do strange things in grief." Genevieve's eyes narrowed. "That only works to a point. If there's evidence you had an affair prior to the claim, or that you intentionally forged or lied about documents, it's going to be a tough road." Emily felt tears prick at her eyes. "What do you suggest we do?" "First," Genevieve said, "we push a narrative of grieving widow with a supportive friend. We question Declan's mental state, after all. He's been in a war zone, possibly traumatized. If we can cast doubt on his reliability, a jury might hesitate to believe him." Pierce nodded vigorously. "Exactly what I was thinking." Genevieve shot him a look that said, "I do the thinking around here." "We also consider a quiet settlement approach if that becomes necessary. But let's start by filing motions to keep him away from you both, citing potential harassment or violent tendencies." Emily sat there, feeling the gulf widen between what was morally right and what was necessary to stay out of prison. She forced herself to nod, wondering if any of this would end without irreparable damage to her soul. At Mac's basement, Declan stared at a digital map pinned with pushpins, where Pierce had possibly orchestrated other questionable death claims. The more he dug, the more it looked like Pierce had a side hustle funneling expedited claims for a fee. The possibility that other families of missing soldiers had been exploited made Declan's blood boil. A call from Rachel interrupted his train of thought. She updated him. "Our motion to freeze further disposal of the insurance payout might be approved soon. That means they can't spend the remaining portion." Declan gave a humorless laugh. "Remaining portion might not be much from what I've seen." "But good." Rachel paused. "I also heard from the Department of Defense. They're close to finalizing the correction of your status. When that official letter is in hand, everything changes. Hang tight." Ending the call, he glanced over at the reflection of his own face in a dusty mirror, leaner, tougher, sporting a steely glare that felt foreign. He missed the days he was just a soldier with a loving wife waiting at home. Now, he was more akin to a lone wolf, prowling the edges of society, preparing to strike. "One step at a time," he reminded himself. "Prove I'm alive, prove their conspiracy. Blow this wide open." A fateful day arrived when Emily tried to withdraw a substantial sum from her shared account with Pierce, only to find it temporarily frozen. She felt a jolt of alarm. The bank manager explained that a legal hold had been placed pending an investigation. Emily stormed into Pierce's office. "Why is our account frozen?" she hissed, eyes wild. Pierce cursed under his breath. "It must be that Myers woman. She's on to us." Emily felt tears at the corners of her eyes. "Pierce, I can't handle living like a criminal." "Then you should have thought about that before we did this," he snapped, but almost instantly regretted the harshness. "Look, calm down. This is a waiting game. Our lawyer's working on it." Emily wanted to scream, to lash out, to run away somewhere no one knew her name or the mess she'd created. But she had to keep it together. She was in too deep. Pierce's next play was to manipulate the record-keeping at the insurance firm. He showed up at the corporate office with forced confidence, wearing a crisp suit and carrying a briefcase. The building's marble floors gleamed under bright fluorescent lights. He stepped off the elevator, ignoring the suspicious glances from colleagues who'd heard the rumors swirling about Captain Hawthorne. He rapped on Owen Truscott's glass office door, stepping inside without waiting for a reply. Owen looked up, bags under his eyes. "Pierce, this is risky." Pierce set the briefcase down, taking a seat uninvited. "I need certain files misplaced, or at least delayed. If an investigator shows up for the Hawthorne claim, we need time to craft a narrative." Owen swallowed hard. "You're talking about evidence tampering. That's a felony." Pierce leaned forward, voice low. "It's not tampering. It's reorganizing. You can do it, or we both go down. You expedited the claim, remember?" Owen's face paled. He typed nervously on his keyboard. "I'll see what I can do, but if compliance or the FBI steps in, we can't hide forever." Pierce left the office, heart pounding. He could feel the noose tightening. Once, he reveled in the thrill of scamming the system. Now, it felt like he was gambling with what remained of his life. That evening, as Declan monitored the feeds, a new visitor appeared on camera, stepping cautiously into Declan's house. It wasn't Emily, or Pierce, rather, a middle-aged man in a cheap suit, rummaging through drawers and snapping photos with a phone. Declan switched to a different camera angle, trying to see the man's face more clearly. He'd never seen him before. "Ramon," Declan said into a phone. "Someone's in my house. I think it's a private investigator." Ramon's voice crackled. "Stay put. Let me see if I can identify him. Did you get a shot of his plates?" Declan typed commands into the software, capturing an image of the man leaving. The car outside displayed a partial plate. Ramon cross-referenced it with a private investigator's license database. "His name is Frank Ivers, P.I., Ramon reported. "Probably hired by Pierce or Emily's attorney to dig dirt on you, maybe to show you're unstable or not actually living there." Declan ground his teeth. "They're searching for anything to smear me. Great." But the next day, something unusual happened. The same private investigator returned, only this time. He left an envelope pinned to the mailbox with a note reading, "We need to talk alone." Declan debated the risk. If it was a trap, he'd be ready. That evening, he arranged to meet Ivers at a neutral location, a dimly lit bar off the highway. He arrived early, claiming a corner booth. At exactly 8 p.m., Ivers walked in, scanning the room before spotting Declan. He approached slowly, no aggression in his stance. "Captain Hawthorne?" Ivers asked, voice low. "Yeah," Declan replied coolly. "I heard you've been snooping." Ivers cleared his throat, taking a seat. "I was hired to find anything incriminating about you PTSD incidents, violent outbursts, questionable finances, but I also stumbled on some details about how they got that insurance money." Declan's eyes narrowed. "Go on." Ivers swallowed. "Look, I'm a private investigator, not a saint. But I have 2 kids in the Marines, and what Pierce and Emily did to you. It's beyond the pale. I can't in good conscience help them bury you." Declan studied Ivers's face, searching for deception. "So you're flipping?" Ivers sighed. "I might be. They wanted me to gather anything to paint you as unhinged. But from everything I've seen and the bits I've overheard from them, you're the victim here." He handed Declan a flash drive. "This is a copy of some recordings I made. Pierce basically admitted to forging the expedited forms. He bragged that your dumb wife believed everything he told her. I have no intention of testifying in their favor." Declan's chest tightened, with a strange mix of gratitude and simmering anger. The betrayal cut deeper hearing it spelled out. Dumb wife? forged forms. But if this flash drive was legit, it was powerful ammunition. Why give me this? Aren't you risking your job or even a lawsuit? Ivers exhaled shakily. I can't sabotage a soldier's life for a quick paycheck. Let's just say I have some moral lines I don't cross. I'll tell them I found nothing on you, and that's that. Declan nodded slowly. Thank you. They parted ways, Ivers leaving first to avoid suspicion. For the first time in months, Declan felt an unexpected wave of hope. Not everyone in the world was out to betray him. Some recognized the line between right and wrong. With new evidence from Ivers plus Carmen's footage, the official letter from the Army reversing Declan's KIA status, and Ramon's contacts hinting at broader fraud, Rachel Myers decided it was time to push forward aggressively. She filed a formal criminal complaint with the U.S. Attorney's Office, citing probable cause that Emily Hawthorne and Pierce Lennox engaged in insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and possible forgery of military death documents. The next morning, a thunderstorm swept through the city as if nature itself sensed the tension. Rachel, Declan, and Ramon huddled in Rachel's office, reviewing the official response from the U.S. Attorney. They're interested, Rachel announced, eyes shining with grim satisfaction. They want more evidence, but they're assigning an investigator. Ramon grinned. Once the feds sniff around, Pierce and Emily are in hot water. Declan kept his composure. Good. They deserve every bit of it. But let's make sure we stay vigilant. They might try to skip town. Rachel nodded. I'll request the court to freeze their passports if it looks like they're a flight risk. Also, I have local law enforcement on alert. Declan gazed out the rain-streaked window, lightning illuminating the dark sky. This was no quick victory. It was a drawn-out war, but he was winning the battles, one piece at a time. The memory of Emily's face still haunted him. He'd once shared a life with her. But now, as thunder rattled the glass, he hardened his heart. She chose her path. Just as they were about to disperse, a courier arrived at Rachel's office door with an envelope. Rachel signed for it, then opened it swiftly. Inside were two documents. One, a restraining order filed against Declan, claiming he was harassing Emily Hawthorne and Pierce Lennox. And two, a legal summons for a preliminary hearing where they intended to question his mental fitness, an attempt to silence him publicly. Rachel let out a short laugh that held no humor. They're playing dirty. Declan took the papers, scanning the lines about him being dangerously unstable from war trauma. His hands shook with rage. After all they did, they have the nerve to paint me as the threat? Ramon frowned. We expected this. It's a standard intimidation tactic. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Then we'll counter it. They want to drag your name through the mud? Fine. We'll bring our evidence to that hearing and see who ends up tarnished. Declan's voice was quiet but intense as thunder rumbled outside. So be it. If they want a public fight, I'll give them one they'll never forget. Chapter 6. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal maneuvering. Declan, through Rachel's guidance, formally contested the restraining order. The gist of Emily and Pierce's complaint claimed that Declan was stalking them, showing up unannounced, making threatening statements. They cited his military background and possible PTSD as reasons to fear for their safety. At a small hearing for the temporary restraining order, Pierce's lawyer, Genevieve Parks, stood to present their case. Captain Hawthorne has a history of armed conflict, potential instability, and deep personal resentment toward my clients. We request that he stay at least 500 feet away to ensure no risk of violence. Rachel stood in response, her posture radiating confidence. Your Honor, the only thing Captain Hawthorne has done is attempt to correct the record of his own faked death. Our evidence will show that Ms. Hawthorne and Mr. Lennox actively conspired to defraud insurance by declaring him deceased. He has no desire to harm them, only to see justice served. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a non-nonsense demeanor, tapped her pen. We'll need more extensive evidence before making a final ruling. For now, I'll keep the restraining order in place in a limited capacity, Mr. Hawthorne. Do not contact or approach Ms. Hawthorne and Mr. Lennox outside of legal proceedings. Declan clenched his jaw, but nodded. He needed no personal confrontation. The day for that would come in a court setting, under the blaze of truth. Outside the courthouse, Emily stood by Pierce's side, heart hammering. The restraining order was a small victory, but the look on Declan's face as the judge spoke told her he was far from finished. Pierce exuded forced confidence, greeting reporters with measured statements like, "We only seek protection. Captain Hawthorne's hostility is well documented." Emily's palms were sweaty. She wanted to vanish. Later, in the privacy of Pierce's condo, Emily paced the living room. "We're just poking the bear, Pierce. Declan won't back down." Pierce sipped a whiskey, gazing out the window. "He's stuck with this order now. He can't come near us." "That doesn't stop the FBI," Emily snapped. "Or the insurance investigation, or his lawyer's attempts to bury us with evidence." Pierce turned, face taut. "Then let's bury him first. We keep pushing the narrative he's unhinged. We find any thread, old Army psych evaluations, PTSD rumors, bar fights, whatever, blow them up in the media." Emily shuddered. "I hate this." Pierce's tone chilled. "You prefer prison for fraud? Because that's what we face if he wins. So toughen up, Emily." She swallowed the urge to scream. It was an ugly game, but he was right. They were on the edge, and Declan's momentum was terrifying. That evening, Rachel, Ramon, and Declan met at a secure location to plan their counterattack. They sat around a battered wooden table, documents spread out among them. Rachel flipped through pages. "We have strong evidence of fraud. The videos, the expedited claim process, Ivers's new recordings, Carmen's porch cam." Ramon tapped a file. "We also suspect Pierce orchestrated more than one questionable claim. If we can connect them, it establishes a pattern of behavior." Declan drummed his fingers. "I want to expose it all. Let's not just convict them for defrauding me. Let's burn their entire operation to the ground." Rachel nodded. "That's the spirit. But let's be meticulous. We'll gather everything, present it to the federal prosecutor, and push for an official indictment." Ramon's face lit with determination. "The more families we find who were misled by Pierce, the bigger the case." Suddenly, Declan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "They're planning to discredit you. Watch out for planted evidence." He showed it to the others. Rachel frowned. "Could be from that private investigator, Ivers, giving a heads up. Means they might fabricate incidents or slip contraband into your space, hoping the cops bust you." Declan set his jaw. "They'll find no easy target here." The next day, Carmen Morales took a bold step. She arranged a meeting with local reporters who specialized in investigative journalism. In a small cafe, she played them some of her porch cam videos and explained that the widow, Emily Hawthorne, had taken $1 million payout under suspicious circumstances while her husband was actually alive. The reporters' eyes widened. They scribbled notes, asked for clarifications, and requested an interview with Declan. Carmen explained he was currently avoiding the public eye due to legal complexities, but might be open to a statement soon. "This story is bigger than just a cheating wife," one reporter said, leaning forward. "It's about a possible ring of insurance fraud targeting military families." Carmen nodded. "Exactly. I'm just a neighbor, but I've seen enough to know something's very wrong." The reporters promised to investigate discreetly. Carmen left, feeling a mix of nerves and satisfaction. She wasn't typically a risk-taker, but she believed Declan deserved any help she could give. If the public turned against Emily and Pierce, it might tilt the scales further in Declan's favor. It didn't take long for Pierce and Emily to realize the media might soon descend. Acting on Genevieve Parks's advice, they orchestrated a quiet background check on Declan's Army record, seeking any negative details. A few minor incidents popped up: a heated argument with a superior, an off-duty bar fight that never led to charges, and possible signs of post-traumatic stress upon returning from an earlier deployment. Genevieve selected the juiciest bits, weaving them into a narrative about Captain Hawthorne's erratic behavior. She leaked these to a willing tabloid site, stirring speculation that Declan was prone to violence. The tabloid headline read, "Is Declan Hawthorne really a war hero or a powder keg?" Subheading, "Documents reveal past unstable episodes." Declan saw the article and felt a white-hot fury. Rachel counseled him, "Don't lash out publicly. This is typical smear tactic. We'll respond with facts." Still, it stung. He was proud of his service, flaws and all. To see it twisted into a cheap smear cut deep. But he refused to let them provoke him into a meltdown. While wading through these developments, Declan received an email from an old Army contact, Sergeant Frey, one of the men from his unit who'd survived the ambush in Syria. The subject line read, "Heard you're alive, need to talk." Heart-pounding, Declan set up a video call with the sergeant, who was currently stationed in Texas. On screen, Frey looked haggard but relieved. "Captain, man, I can't believe it. We all thought you were gone." Declan nodded, wincing at the memory. "I nearly was. How are you?" Frey shrugged. "Banged up but breathing. Listen, I heard rumors stateside that you're in a legal mess with your wife. Some of us saw you on the news." "News travels fast." Frey cleared his throat. "If you need statements about how the Army declared you missing, not confirmed dead, I'm your man. We tried telling them to hold off on finalizing the KIA, but administration was in a rush. Maybe she used that to push the insurance claim." Declan felt a swell of gratitude. "Thanks, Frey. Your testimony about the chaotic aftermath might help. They can't say Emily had conclusive proof I was dead." Frey nodded vigorously. "Count me in. You saved my ass more than once. I owe you." They ended the call, leaving Declan with renewed resolve. For all the betrayals he'd faced, loyalty still thrived among his brothers in arms. Late at night, unable to sleep, Emily wandered the halls of the house she once shared with Declan. The pictures she hadn't yet removed taunted her: wedding photos by a lake, an anniversary trip to the mountains. She remembered how safe she felt with him, how proud she was of his service, how she used to cry when he left for missions. Now she was an active participant in destroying him. She quietly slipped into the bedroom, noticing Pierce was out, likely dealing with more crisis management. She drew a dusty photo album from a closet shelf. In one snapshot, Declan had a broad smile, arms around her shoulders, wearing an Army uniform. They looked so young and hopeful. "What happened to us?" she whispered, tears blurring her vision. She recalled the creeping dissatisfaction with military life, the endless deployments, the fear of him never returning. Then Pierce, with his charm and financial promise, had swooped in, making her feel valued in ways she thought Declan no longer did. She believed Pierce's narrative that Declan was as good as gone, so she took the leap, forging documents to speed up the insurance money. At first, it felt like a safety net, a means to secure her future in case the worst truly happened. Then it snowballed. "I never wanted it to go this far," she told the darkness. But it had. And now she might lose everything. Ramon's phone buzzed with a message from an FBI contact. "Willing to hear your case. Need a formal presentation of evidence." Overjoyed, he raced to Rachel's office. Declan joined them, and they spent hours meticulously preparing a file. The illegally expedited forms, the video proof, recorded admissions from Ivers, and statements from Carmen, Sergeant Frey, and others. The following day, they traveled to the local FBI field office. A pair of special agents, Agent Kincaid and Agent Donnelly, greeted them in a stark interview room. Kincaid tapped a pencil on the table. "So, you're telling me an insurance broker has been systematically forging or speeding up payouts for soldiers declared missing?" Ramon nodded. "He targets high-risk cases. Captain Hawthorne's was the largest, but we suspect more." Rachel slid over a thick binder. "We have phone call transcripts, bank statements, and inside knowledge from a private investigator who overheard Pierce bragging about forging documents." Kincaid leafed through it, exchanging a significant glance with Donnelly. "This is serious. If the evidence holds, we might be looking at a multifaceted conspiracy ring." Declan looked them straight in the eye. "I just want justice. Not just for me, but any soldier's family he scammed." Agent Donnelly nodded. "We'll do a preliminary review. If it checks out, we'll open a formal investigation. That means subpoenas, searching their financial records, everything." They parted ways, hearts pounding with possibility. If the FBI launched a formal probe, Pierce and Emily wouldn't just face a civil suit. From Declan, they'd face the full might of federal prosecution. A few days later, a local news station ran a brief but explosive segment. "A live soldier's wife collected death benefits, fraud alleged." They'd interviewed Carmen under condition of anonymity, disguising her voice, but they aired partial footage from her porch cam, Emily and Pierce celebrating the $1 million check. They blurred faces, but the voices and context were unmistakable. The fallout was swift. Neighbors whispered, social media buzzed, and Emily found her phone flooded with calls from acquaintances wanting to know if the rumors were true. Pierce was livid, hounding Owen at the insurance firm to bury records faster. Sensing the turn in public perception, Pierce's attorney, Genevieve Parks, filed a defamation suit against the local news channel and threatened Carmen Morales with legal action for invasion of privacy. The goal was to scare them into retracting the story. "We must quash this PR nightmare," Genevieve insisted in a phone call to Pierce. "If the public narrative cements that you're a fraudster, the legal arena will tilt in Hawthorne's favor." Pierce seethed. "Then do something. That neighbor Carmen is fueling the flames." Genevieve replied icily, "I'm on it." Meanwhile, Emily paced the living room as Pierce ranted. She felt cornered, certain that every step they took only deepened the pit. They were trying to fight a war on multiple fronts: legal, public opinion, even criminal investigation. She suspected it was just a matter of time before the walls caved in. One rainy afternoon, Carmen left her house to run errands. On the curb, Pierce emerged from his car, blocking her path. She froze, heart hammering. He wore an impeccably pressed suit, but looked haggard, eyes red with anger. "We need to talk," Pierce hissed. Carmen lifted her chin. "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Lennox." "Oh, but you do. Your meddling has put Emily and me under a microscope. Congratulations." He advanced a step, a menacing aura. Carmen refused to back down. "I just shared the truth. If you don't like it, maybe you shouldn't have done anything wrong." Pierce's lips twitched. "Do you understand the risk you're taking? People can sue you for defamation or worse." "Sue away," she snapped, though fear prickled her. "I'm not backing off. Declan deserves justice." A tense silence. Then Pierce stepped aside, muttering, "Don't say I didn't warn you." before stomping back to his car. Carmen climbed into hers, hands trembling, but her resolve unshaken. She was scared, yes, but morally convinced that defending Declan was right. Late that night, Rachel got a call from the FBI. Agents Kincaid and Donnelly had reviewed the evidence and found it compelling enough to propose an official indictment. They believed they had probable cause to charge Pierce with multiple counts of fraud and possibly name Emily as a co-conspirator. Rachel relayed the good news to Declan via speakerphone while Ramon listened. "We're not out of the woods yet," Rachel cautioned. "But if the grand jury returns an indictment, this shifts from civil litigation to criminal court. They'll be facing actual prison time." Declan exhaled, relief mixing with righteous anger. Let them see how it feels to lose everything. He couldn't help but remember the day he first enlisted, Emily hugging him tearfully, promising to always support him. Now, that memory was overshadowed by her betrayal. He steeled himself, silently vowing that no matter how tough the road ahead, he would see this through. The stage was set for a showdown. The FBI moved quietly to confirm more evidence, building up to a potential grand jury hearing. The media stirred, with rumors swirling about the soldier who wouldn't stay dead. Pierce and Emily faced a swirl of lawsuits, investigations, and reputational damage. Meanwhile, Declan and his allies prepared for a final offensive, determined to expose every crooked detail of Pierce's insurance scam. Outside, storm clouds gathered again. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Declan gazed at the ominous sky through a window, a sardonic smile curving his lips. For so long, he'd fought battles abroad, never imagining the fiercest war of his life would be on home soil, against the woman who once wore his wedding band and the friend who'd been like a brother. Bring it on, he thought. I survived Syria. I'll survive this. And they won't. Chapter 7. A pale dawn bathed the city in an anemic light. In the heart of downtown, a federal building stood austere, flanked by armed security. Inside, agents Kincaid and Donnelly were finalizing their presentation to the assistant U.S. attorney, a sharp-eyed man named Tobias Blackwell. Rows of files, spreadsheets, and compiled evidence lay on a conference table. Kincaid spoke first. "We have enough to convene a grand jury, in our opinion. Pierce Lennox systematically expedited or forged documents for multiple high-value death benefit claims." Donnelly nodded. "We suspect Hawthorne's case was just the largest payout. We're finding at least 3 other families who had suspicious claim processing." AUSA Blackwell steepled his fingers. "And the wife's role? Emily Hawthorne?" "At minimum, an accessory to the primary fraud," Kincaid said. "She signed documentation claiming Captain Hawthorne was definitively dead, despite the Army never confirming a body." Blackwell surveyed the files, eyes narrowing at the brazen patterns. "We'll move forward. Let's gather those families to testify if possible. We want an airtight case." Thus began the formal steps toward an indictment. Pierce Lennox would soon feel the full weight of the federal system bearing down on him. Back at Pierce's condo, tensions ran high. The phone rang incessantly, calls from the insurance firm, from Emily, from Genevieve Parks. Piercing sun rays sneaked through the blinds, revealing the disarray: scattered documents, half-empty liquor glasses, a laptop with dozens of open tabs on defamation law. Pierce hurled his phone onto the couch. "Damn it!" Emily flinched. "Who was that?" "An internal compliance officer at Morris & Beck Insurance. They're freezing me out of certain systems, probably cooperating with the feds." Emily sank into a chair, her face pale. "So it's happening?" Pierce glowered. "Yes, and if we don't get a handle on this, we'll both be indicted." The unspoken blame hung in the air. Emily felt it pressing down on her, a suffocating sensation of being pinned. She whispered, "Could we do a deal? Turn ourselves in? Give them bigger fish?" Pierce's eyes flickered with alarm. "Don't even think about that. You squeal, you'll regret it." Her lips trembled. "Pierce, I'm scared." He stepped closer, voice low and menacing. "We stand together or we go down together. Don't forget we're equally guilty." But Emily wasn't sure they were equally guilty. Pierce had orchestrated the entire scheme, after all. The seed of betrayal sprouted in her mind. Maybe cooperating with authorities was her only path to a lighter sentence. Ramon had tracked down other potential victims of Pierce's manipulations, Gloria Adams and Tamara Nguyen. Both widows of soldiers declared missing in action and quickly paid out. Their families never questioned the expedited payouts, but certain details later felt off. Now, with the FBI sniffing around, these women were starting to see they might have been used. They met in a small private room at Rachel's office, along with Declan. The mood was tense, but a sense of camaraderie formed among them, united by betrayal from the same man. Gloria rubbed her wedding ring, eyes moist. "Pierce convinced me the Army drags its feet with MIA cases. He said if I waited, I'd risk losing benefits." Tamara nodded. "He told me something similar. Looking back, it felt manipulative." Declan listened quietly. He'd never personally met these women, but he recognized their pain, a twisted reflection of what he'd endured. "So we share a common enemy," he said softly. "Pierce used your grief for profit." Rachel explained how their stories might help the federal investigation. "By showing a pattern, expedited claims with questionable paperwork, we can prove Pierce's willful fraud. It's bigger than just Captain Hawthorne's case." A spark of defiance lit in Gloria's eyes. "I'll testify. That man took advantage of me at my lowest. If this helps put him behind bars, count me in." Tamara seconded the motion. Declan felt a wave of gratitude. These women had suffered in their own right, and now they were bravely stepping forward. Justice could be unstoppable when the victims united. Sensing the net closing, Genevieve Parks launched into full damage control mode. She arranged press interviews for Emily, coaching her on how to appear sympathetic and spin the story of a lonely widow misled by faulty Army reports. Local news interview. Reporter: "Mrs. Hawthorne, the community is stunned by revelations that your husband, Captain Declan Hawthorne, is alive. How do you respond to accusations of fraud?" Emily, sitting rigidly under the studio lights, forced tears to her eyes. "I'm devastated by all these allegations. The Army told me Declan was killed in action. I was heartbroken. Mr. Lennox simply helped me navigate the confusing insurance process." Reporter: "Did you at any point suspect Captain Hawthorne might still be alive?" Emily put on a trembling lip, eyes flicking downward. "Never. I would never have moved forward if I believed otherwise." She stuck to Genevieve's script, portraying herself as a naive victim. But inside, she felt the falsehood burn like acid. She'd known the Army was uncertain, but Pierce insisted the best approach was to declare finality. She was complicit, no doubt. Still, playing the naive card was her only lifeline. Watching Emily's interview from Mac's basement, Declan felt a flash of white-hot anger. She was turning on the waterworks for the camera, all while ignoring the cheer she shared with Pierce on the porch cam. He turned to the camera feed still set up in his old living room, catching bits of hush-hush phone calls Pierce made about forging disclaimers. A fresh wave of disgust washed over him. "Two can play the PR game," Rachel suggested. "Agree to an interview with a reputable outlet, someone we can trust to present your side." Declan hesitated. He hated the idea of turning his personal tragedy into a media spectacle. But if public opinion influenced potential jurors, maybe it was wise to set the record straight. He eventually agreed to a carefully arranged interview with a major local station. In a Spartan setting, just him in front of a neutral background, Declan told his story. The ambush in Syria, his rescue, the labyrinth of bureaucracy that declared him dead, and the shock of finding out his best friend and wife had quickly capitalized on his death. Interviewer: Captain, some claim you might be angry or unstable from your experiences. How do you respond? Declan kept his cool. Anger is natural when you discover the people you trusted most betrayed you. But I am channeling that into legal recourse. I want them to face justice through the courts. Interviewer: And Emily Hawthorne's assertion that she truly believed you were gone? Declan's jaw tightened. I have evidence that strongly contradicts that. I'd rather let the facts speak in court. The interviewer seemed impressed by Declan's composure, highlighting his decorated service record and the manipulative nature of the false claim. With that, the tide of public sympathy began to shift more strongly in his favor. One late night, Emily found herself alone again in the house. Pierce was meeting a source, or so he claimed. She suspected he was panicking, searching for any fix to salvage their sinking ship. She tried to sleep, but nightmares plagued her, nightmares of men in uniforms banging on her door, hauling her away in cuffs. Finally, she turned on the lamp and rummaged through an old trunk. Inside, she found letters from Declan's earliest deployments, filled with tender words about how he couldn't wait to see her smile again. She read one letter where he mentioned a hidden stash of money he was saving to take her to Paris for their anniversary, something he never got the chance to do. A sob tore from her throat. She realized that once they had a genuine love, but she'd thrown it away for easy money and an affair with Pierce, whose glib reassurances now felt hollow. Emily felt a crack in her defenses. What if she told the FBI everything about Pierce's manipulations, possibly cutting a deal? The thought both terrified and intrigued her. Could I do that? She whispered to the silent walls. Would it matter? Unbeknownst to Emily, Pierce was orchestrating a last-ditch plot. Through his shady contacts, he intended to frame Declan for a violent incident, something to reinforce the unstable soldier narrative. If he could get Declan arrested or indicted on an unrelated charge, maybe it would overshadow the fraud allegations. Pierce hired 2 low-level thugs, instructing them to vandalize a property in Declan's name, leaving behind ballistic evidence or forced signs of aggression. The plan was risky and sloppy, but desperation fueled Pierce. Make it look like he snapped, Pierce hissed to the thugs, handing them an envelope of cash. Nothing traceable back to me. The men grinned, but behind those grins was the potential for a bungled job. Luckily, Ramon was no novice. He caught a whisper of Pierce's scheme through his network of informants. He called Declan at midnight, the urgency palpable in his voice. They're trying to set you up, man, Ramon warned. Some guys were paid off to stage a crime scene in your name. Declan's rage flared. God, the nerve! We have to stop them or gather proof. I'll do some recon, see if we can intercept. Don't do anything reckless, Ramon cautioned. Declan nodded, but inside, his sense of righteous fury burned. Pierce was cornered, and a cornered rat was dangerous. It only strengthened Declan's resolve to see him face the harshest consequences. Ramon rallied 2 trusted ex-FBI buddies who had local PI licenses. They staked out the location rumored to be the target of Pierce's frame job, an abandoned warehouse that Declan had once owned shares in through a joint investment. The place was derelict, hardly known to anyone. Sure enough, near 2 a.m., a black SUV pulled up. 2 men hopped out carrying spray paint cans, a baseball bat, and what looked like a false Army ID with Declan's name. They cackled as they smashed a few windows, scrawling, "This is for the war," on a wall. Ramon's team filmed everything from the shadows, capturing audio. One thug muttered, "We'll leave the ID behind so the cops think this freak soldier had some meltdown." The other snickered, "Pierce Lennox sure hates this guy. Pays big for this, though." The ex-FBI men moved in swiftly, identifying themselves and pinning the thugs to the ground. With no real fight, the criminals surrendered. The PIS called the local police, who arrived soon after, perplexed by the half-finished staging. Ramon confronted the rattled men. "So, Pierce Lennox paid you?" "Yeah," one stammered, sweat trickling down his face. "He's the one who set it all up." They were promptly arrested and the entire incident was documented. Another nail in Pierce's coffin. When the FBI heard about the attempted frame-up, courtesy of Ramon's taped confession from the detained criminals, they moved with renewed vigor. Agent Kincaid updated Rachel and Declan. "We'll incorporate this into the case. Trying to frame a federal witness that's an additional charge for Mr. Lennox if we prove it. It underscores consciousness of guilt." Declan clenched his fists. "He's going down." Now, the momentum felt unstoppable. The puzzle pieces were forming a clear picture of Pierce's moral bankruptcy and Emily's complicity. Federal investigators would soon finalize the charges. A week later, Pierce received an urgent call from Owen Truscott at the insurance firm. They spoke in hushed tones. Owen: "Pierce, the company compliance team has turned over all expedited claims to the FBI. They found your logins and timestamps referencing unauthorized changes." Pierce broke into a cold sweat. "Well, what does that mean?" Owen: "It means you're going to be indicted, man. The CEO decided to cooperate fully with the feds to avoid the entire company going down." Pierce yelled into the phone. "Damn you, Owen! You promised you'd cover my back." Owen's voice was stony. "I'm not risking my freedom for you. You roped me into this. I just wanted a better bonus, not a prison sentence." The line went dead. Pierce slumped to the floor, dread coiling in his stomach. For all his cunning, he was outflanked. The world he meticulously constructed was imploding. Unaware of the specific meltdown Pierce was having, Emily visited Genevieve Parks for a legal consult. The attorney gave her a hard look. "Emily, I have reason to believe the feds are about to indict you as well. We need a strategy." Emily's heart pounded. "What are my options?" Genevieve sighed. "One option is to consider turning state's evidence against Pierce. If you can prove he manipulated you, you might get a plea deal, reduced charges." Emily fiddled with her hands. "So, I betray Pierce to save myself." The lawyer gave a thin smile. "He's the bigger fish. The feds might accept that." Emily felt sick. She hated Pierce now, in many ways, but the idea of betraying him after everything was daunting. Still, the thought of prison terrified her more. She nodded slowly, eyes distant. "If I do that, will I have to face Declan in court?" Genevieve shrugged. "Likely, yes. But this is about your survival, Emily." So the seeds of betrayal turned. Emily realized she might do exactly what Pierce warned her never to do. Cut a deal and let him take the fall. At dawn on a cool morning, the FBI held a press conference. Agent Kincaid stood at a podium, flanked by other law enforcement officials. Cameras clicked, reporters jockeyed for position. Kincaid read from a prepared statement. "A federal grand jury has returned indictments against Mr. Pierce Lennox for conspiracy to commit fraud, multiple counts of insurance fraud, and additional charges related to attempts at obstructing justice. Ms. Emily Hawthorne is also named as a co-conspirator in the primary charges." In the basement hideout, Declan watched the live broadcast with Rachel and Ramon. The wave of relief was almost overwhelming. He closed his eyes, exhaling. There it was, the official moment he'd dreamed of since the night he returned from Syria to find his life stolen. "They're indicted," Rachel confirmed. "Now we prepare for trial. It's not over yet, but we're on the right track." Declan's voice was grimly satisfied. "Finally. Now let's make sure they face every consequence they deserve." Meanwhile, Pierce sat in stunned silence at his condo, phone ringing off the hook with messages from the insurance firm, potential co-conspirators, and Emily. He stared at the TV screen, announcing his name among indicted suspects. The war he'd waged against Declan was about to come to a head, and he had no escape left. Chapter 8. The days following the official indictment were a blur of legal motions and frantic attempts at damage control. Pierce and Emily, now formally charged, had to surrender their passports, ensuring they couldn't flee. Their bank accounts were frozen beyond any minimal living expenses. The strain was visible on Emily's face each time she stepped outside. Neighbors whispered, cameras flashed, and her phone never stopped buzzing. Genevieve Parks managed a last-ditch press conference for Pierce. The objective: protest his innocence. Claim the indictment was overreaching, but reporters skewered him with questions about the newly revealed attempt to frame Declan at the warehouse. Pierce stammered vague denials, sweat beading on his brow. "I'm the victim of a vicious smear campaign orchestrated by a resentful ex-soldier," Pierce declared shakily. The press corps erupted with follow-ups. "What about the multiple families who claim you pushed them into signing suspicious death benefit forms?" "No further comment," Genevieve snapped, ushering Pierce away. The cracks in Pierce's bravado were now gaping. He felt cornered like a wounded animal, lashing out at anyone who dared question him. Emily watched from the sidelines, face pale, uncertain how to react. She suspected that if she joined the press conference, the questions about her affair with Pierce would overshadow everything else. 2 days later, Emily knocked softly on the door of Rachel Myers's office alone. Rachel, eyebrows raised, let her in. Declan was in a conference call at the moment, so it was just the two women in the room. Rachel folded her arms. "Bold move, coming here. Shouldn't your lawyer be present?" Emily's voice was quiet, trembling. "I'm not here as an adversary. I want to talk about a deal." Rachel kept her face neutral. "Go on?" Emily swallowed hard. "I can provide details on how Pierce set everything up, scripts he used, false documents, the bribing of certain employees. In exchange, maybe the prosecutors can reduce my charges." Rachel studied her carefully. She saw a woman on the edge, guilt, desperation, maybe even a flicker of remorse. "And what do you expect from me?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Help me arrange it, please. I know I'm guilty. I know I hurt Declan. But Pierce masterminded so many parts of this. I don't want to go to prison for the rest of my life." Rachel let out a slow breath. "I can't promise anything, but I can relay your willingness to cooperate to the U.S. Attorney. Ultimately, it's their call." Emily nodded. "That's all I ask. And could you tell Declan I'm sorry?" She fled the room before Rachel could respond. It was a small gesture, but perhaps genuine. Rachel typed a quick note, summarizing Emily's offer of cooperation. She intended to forward it to the FBI agents and the AUSA. Whether or not the feds would accept her as a cooperating witness was another matter entirely. When Rachel told Declan about Emily's unexpected visit, his face hardened. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned inside him: rage, betrayal, longing for what once was, and a hint of pity. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "If she has real evidence that helps the criminal case against Pierce, we should use it," he said finally, voice tight. "But I don't want to see her walk away scot-free." Rachel nodded. "Understood. Cooperation might reduce her sentence, not erase it. That's typically how it goes. Declan exhaled. So be it. His mind lingered on her request. Could you tell Declan I'm sorry? He didn't trust the sincerity, but a small part of him remembered the love they once shared. Yet the bitterness overshadowed any sentimentality. She helped stage his funeral, after all. That was no mere mistake. Within the next week, Emily, accompanied by Genevieve, met with the Assistant U.S. Attorney, Tobias Blackwell, in a closed-door session. She offered a proffer detailing her knowledge of Pierce's methods, naming other potential participants and referencing the ways he circumvented standard verification procedures for soldier death claims. Blackwell listened impassively, taking notes. "We'll verify your statements. If they check out, we might offer a plea deal. But you'll have to plead guilty to lesser charges, serve some time, or at least probation. That's non-negotiable." Emily's shoulders trembled. "I accept." Genevieve tried to push for a no-prison arrangement, but Blackwell was firm. "This isn't a victimless crime. You participated in defrauding the system and undermined the memory of real fallen soldiers. We can't let that slide." Emily left the meeting pale but determined. She made her bed, and now, at least, she was trying to salvage what was left of her life. It didn't take long for news of Emily's cooperation to reach Pierce. He confronted her in the corridor outside the law offices, his face contorted with fury. "You turned on me!" he snarled, voice a harsh whisper. Emily recoiled. "I'm saving myself. You'd do the same in my place." Pierce slammed a hand against the wall, making her flinch. "You ungrateful. I took you in when you were vulnerable." She glared back, tears in her eyes. "And you used me. You told me Declan was definitely gone so we could cash out. I believed you, but I never wanted to break the law. You manipulated everything." A standoff of silence. Then Pierce hissed, "You'll regret this." He stormed away, leaving Emily trembling. She hugged herself, recalling how she once saw Pierce as a savior from a bleak future. Now she understood she'd merely replaced one set of fears with another. The next phase was Emily's official testimony before the grand jury. She confirmed all the major points: Pierce's forging strategies, the fraudulent documentation, the knowledge that the Army never conclusively confirmed Declan's death. She also implicated Owen Truscott and other insurance employees who'd taken bribes. The grand jury revised the indictment, adding new charges against Pierce for conspiracy involving multiple co-defendants. Meanwhile, Emily was singled out for a plea deal, pending final sentencing recommendations from the court. As the trial date neared, Pierce descended into near madness. The insurance firm publicly fired him, disclaiming all involvement in his rogue activities. He lost his condo to mounting legal fees. Even Genevieve Parks began hinting that her retainer was insufficient. Surrounded by accusations, he found no solace. One evening in a Spartan motel room, Pierce poured whiskey down his throat, flipping through old photos. Him and Declan in their younger days, joking around after a high school football game. Him and Emily in a clandestine restaurant meeting early in their affair. He felt a twisted swirl of hatred and regret. In a drunken haze, he cursed them both, Declan for refusing to stay dead, Emily for betraying him to the feds. "I made them who they are," he muttered to the stale air. "I gave Emily a new life. And how does she repay me? By selling me out." He considered running, forging a new identity, but the FBI had eyes everywhere. His lawyers would never condone it. He was stuck. For the first time in his life, Pierce had no upper hand. In Rachel's office, the team, Declan, Ramon, and Rachel, reviewed the mountain of evidence for the upcoming trial. They had the official Army correction of Declan's status, testaments from other scammed families, Carmen's porch cam footage, the confessions from the incompetent thugs Pierce hired, and now Emily's official statements. It was an ironclad net. Rachel gave a small smile. "I think we're ready. The U.S. Attorney's Office is confident they'll secure convictions." Declan nodded. Tension coiled in his posture. "After everything, I just want to see them held accountable. This has consumed my entire life since I returned." Ramon clasped Declan's shoulder. "You've come this far. You'll finish strong." There was quiet satisfaction in the room. A sense of closure was near, though not guaranteed. Trials could be unpredictable, but their case was potent. Declan wondered how he'd feel to see Emily in a courtroom. Would he pity her, hate her, or a complicated mix of both? Regardless, justice was marching forward, unstoppable. Word spread that the trial would have major ramifications for military insurance protocols. The press swarmed. Some outlets championed Declan as a hero who unmasked a ring of corruption, while others thrived on the scandalous angle of a love triangle and betrayal. Carmen, glowing under the label whistleblower, gave a few more interviews, always emphasizing that she was just a concerned neighbor who refused to remain silent. Meanwhile, Emily's public appearances vanished. She kept her head down, following Genevieve's advice to avoid further interviews. Pierce tried to stage one last press conference to declare his innocence, but hardly any reporters showed up, and those who did hammered him with facts gleaned from the indictment. He left in a fury, more humiliated than ever. On the eve of the trial, Declan sat alone in Mac's basement, gazing at old photos of him and Emily. Part of him tried to piece together when exactly their marriage had died. Had it been rotting for years? Or was it truly stolen by Pierce's manipulations? He'd never know for sure. War changes people. Distance, fear, and greed can corrode even strong bonds. He whispered to the silent gloom, "Tomorrow, I face you both in court. I hope it's worth it, Emily." He thought of the men who died in Syria, Martinez, Rodriguez, and others. Their memory fueled him. He had survived to defend the honor of those who served, to ensure no one else exploited a soldier's MIA status for profit. Tomorrow's trial was a pivotal moment, not just for him, but for the principle that no betrayal could go unpunished. Lightning flashed outside, thunder rolling across the sky. Declan took it as a sign, a reflection of the storm that had been his life these past months. Tomorrow, it all converged in a courtroom showdown that would determine the fate of Pierce Lennox, Emily Hawthorne, and the system they tried to deceive. "I'm ready," Declan said. Morning broke gray and overcast. Lawyers, reporters, witnesses, and supporters gathered at the federal courthouse's grand steps. In a swirl of camera flashes, Emily arrived with Genevieve, looking pale but resigned. Pierce, wearing a suit that no longer fit well, trudged behind his own legal team, face set in a bitter scowl. Across the courtyard, Declan stepped from a car, flanked by Rachel and Ramon, shoulders squared. A hush fell as the parties locked eyes. This was it, the final confrontation for everything that had been lost, stolen, and corrupted. In that charged moment, thunder rumbled again in the distance, and each figure steeled themselves to play their role in the trial that would decide their futures. Chapter 9. A low winter sun hung over the federal courthouse, casting elongated shadows across the concrete steps. Reporters and curious onlookers formed a throng by the entrance, holding up microphones and cameras. The tension in the crisp air was palpable. This was day one of the trial of Pierce Lennox and Emily Hawthorne, indicted on multiple charges of insurance fraud, conspiracy, and attempted obstruction of justice. Declan Hawthorne stepped out of a dark sedan, accompanied by Rachel Myers and Ramon Alvarez. Dressed in a fitted navy suit, Declan exuded calm determination. The echo of reporters shouting his name reverberated off the stone walls, but he merely nodded politely as he passed. Rachel leaned over. "Don't let them corner you for statements. We have a solid case. Let the evidence speak." Declan's jaw tightened. "I've waited too long for this. No slip-ups." They entered the courthouse foyer, the overhead lights stark and unflattering. Down a wide corridor, marble floors gleamed, and U.S. flags stood at intervals. People bustled in suits, heavy files in hand. A hush spread as Declan strode by. Some recognized him from media coverage. The soldier who came back to find his wife had already buried him. Whispers swirled about how he single-handedly exposed a network of fraudulent claims. In a separate corridor, Pierce Lennox shuffled in with his lawyer team, including the formidable Genevieve Parks. Pierce's once confident swagger was gone, replaced by stiff shoulders and darting eyes. He spotted Declan from across the hallway, and for a fleeting moment their gazes locked, a silent exchange of hatred and finality. Behind Pierce, Emily Hawthorne appeared. She looked drawn, avoiding eye contact with both men. She'd parted ways with Pierce's legal counsel to accept her own representation, courtesy of the partial cooperation deal. Anxiety emanated from her as she clutched a thin binder. She faced the surreal reality that she was about to testify against Pierce to mitigate her own punishment. Ramon whispered to Declan, "They're both cracked. Let's finish them." Declan's nod was imperceptible. He turned toward the double doors of the courtroom, preparing for the final battle. Judge Marietta Clemens presided, a woman of serious bearing and decades of experience in federal fraud cases. The courtroom was a broad expanse of polished wood, heavy benches, and an imposing judge's dais. The air smelled faintly of furniture polish and tension. The process of jury selection began, with both sides carefully vetting prospective jurors. Rachel's team aimed for those who respected the military and had little tolerance for white-collar crime. Genevieve, representing Pierce, tried to exclude anyone who might be swayed by an emotional soldier's story. Meanwhile, Emily's lawyer, Marshall Keating, negotiated quietly with the prosecution about the terms of her cooperation. She wouldn't be on trial, the same way Pierce was. Her partial plea deal meant she faced sentencing after the proceedings, contingent on her testimony. After hours, a panel of 12 was finalized. Judge Clemens announced, "We'll proceed with opening statements this afternoon." The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Tobias Blackwell, stood to deliver the government's opening remarks. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blackwell began, voice ringing with authority, "this is a case of deception, greed, and betrayal. The defendants, Pierce Lennox and Emily Hawthorne, exploited a military wife's heartbreak, or so they claimed, yet the evidence will show it was a cold, calculated plan to collect over $1 million in life insurance for a soldier who was not dead." He laid out the timeline. Declan's deployment to Syria, the erroneous KIA classification, Pierce's swift use of his insurance connections, and Emily's complicity in forging crucial documents. The hush in the courtroom deepened as Blackwell promised to show actual audio, video, and witness statements that remove all doubt about the defendant's guilt. Next, Genevieve Parks rose, cutting a stark figure in her tailored suit. She paced before the jury box, her heels clicking ominously. "The government's portrayal is a gross oversimplification. My client, Pierce Lennox, is an insurance broker who believed official Army documentation. The alleged fraud was simply fast-tracked paperwork based on the standard grieving widow's claim. Captain Hawthorne's miraculous reappearance, while wonderful, shouldn't be used to brand my client a criminal. You will see a tale of confusion and heartbreak, not a conspiracy." She carefully avoided mentioning the other families that Pierce had allegedly swindled, shifting blame to bureaucratic chaos and the Army's rushed reports. The jury seemed attentive, but not obviously swayed. Finally, Emily's lawyer, Marshall Keating, offered no opening statement for her. She wasn't on trial in the same sense. She would be called as a government witness eventually. The stage was set. The trial would be a test of who could present the clearer, more powerful narrative. The prosecution wasted no time calling Declan Hawthorne as one of its first witnesses. He approached the stand, solemnly swore the oath, and took his seat. Dressed in a crisp suit, his short hair neatly combed, he looked every bit the composed ex-soldier ready to face adversity. Blackwell began gently, letting Declan recount his background, his military service, the ambush in Syria, his months missing in action. The courtroom sat transfixed as he described the explosion that took out part of his unit and the local Kurdish fighters who helped him survive. Some jurors leaned forward, expressions reflecting empathy and shock at his harrowing ordeal. Blackwell, "Captain, upon returning stateside, what did you find?" Declan's eyes hardened. "I found my home occupied by Mr. Lennox and my wife, Emily Hawthorne. They were celebrating my supposed death benefits. They believed I died and had already spent a large portion of the $1 million. Blackwell, how did you learn about the insurance claim? Declan, I overheard them discussing it. Later, I discovered official documents, signed and expedited by Pierce Lennox, that declared me conclusively dead despite no body being found." Blackwell guided him through the timeline, revealing how Declan reached out to an attorney, discovered more about Pierce's fraudulent pattern, and ultimately built the case we now see in court. The gallery listened in tense silence, absorbing every detail. Then came the cross-examination. Genevieve Parks rose, her voice steely. "Parks, Captain Hawthorne, I commend your service. However, I need to explore your mental and emotional state during the period you claim to have discovered my client's wrongdoing. Isn't it true you were experiencing post-traumatic stress from your captivity?" Declan's jaw tightened. "I was recovering from injuries, yes, but I was coherent enough to recognize fraud." Parks gave a sympathetic nod, leaning into a posture that suggested concern. "Might it be possible that under the strain of post-war stress, you misinterpreted my client's genuine assistance to your wife?" Declan's voice hardened. "I misinterpreted them using my name to collect $1 million policy? I don't think so." She pressed on, citing old bar fights or rumored episodes of aggression. Declan maintained his composure, explaining that any minor altercations were unrelated to the events at hand. The jury seemed to lean sympathetic to him, unimpressed by Parks's attempts to cast him as unstable. Parks, no further questions. Declan stepped down, tension radiating from him. He glanced at the defense table. Pierce averted his eyes. Emily stared at her lap. Next, the prosecution called Gloria Adams and Tamara Nguyen, two widows who'd also been manipulated by Pierce's expedited claims. Their testimonies were emotional, describing how Pierce persuaded them that waiting for official MIA confirmations would leave them destitute, so they signed early death benefit forms. The women's voices wavered, but they never lost the thread of righteous indignation, making it clear Pierce's tactics were a pattern of exploiting vulnerable families. When Genevieve Parks cross-examined them, she tried to paint it as standard insurance processes. But the sheer similarity of their stories eroded her arguments. The jury's expressions showed empathy for these widows, further undermining Pierce's claims of innocence. Then came Carmen Morales. She arrived wearing a modest blouse and skirt, her face resolute. She explained how she'd suspected Emily and Pierce were having an affair before the funeral, noticing secretive gatherings. She described her porch camera, the champagne footage capturing them gleefully celebrating the arrival of the check. Blackwell played a short clip. Emily and Pierce on the porch popping the cork. Emily's voice, "We did it. 1 million, baby. Pierce kissed her neck, saying, "No one suspects a thing." The images and audio hammered the jury with proof of callous indifference. Parks attempted to challenge the legality of Carmen's recordings, but the judge allowed it, pointing to the relevant local law permitting security surveillance. Carmen maintained a calm, unwavering demeanor. She was indeed the neighbor who refused to stay silent. The jury was riveted. In a dramatic pivot, the prosecution introduced evidence that Pierce tried to frame Declan by paying criminals to stage a violent incident in a warehouse. The ex-FBI buddies of Ramon took the stand, describing how they caught the hired thugs on camera. The court watched a video of the men confessing they were paid by Pierce Lennox to make it look like Declan trashed the place. Audible gasps rippled through the gallery. Blackwell: "This, ladies and gentlemen, is not the action of an innocent man. It's the desperate attempt of someone determined to sabotage Captain Hawthorne's credibility." Genevieve Parks looked visibly rattled. She tried to object on grounds of relevance, but Judge Clemens overruled. The prosecution hammered home the point. Pierce was actively obstructing justice, further evidence of consciousness of guilt. On day 2 of the trial, the government finally called Emily Hawthorne to the stand. Tension soared. Pierce stared daggers at her. She avoided his gaze, heart pounding as she took the oath. Dressed in a subdued gray dress, Emily faced the jury with trembling hands. She'd cut a deal to testify truthfully against Pierce in exchange for the possibility of reduced charges. This was her moment to come clean and, in some measure, atone. Blackwell, in a gentle tone: "Mrs. Hawthorne, could you describe your relationship with Mr. Lennox?" Emily swallowed. "We were friends first, but it turned into an affair. I was lonely, worried about Declan's deployments. Pierce convinced me he cared about me in ways Declan no longer did." She hesitated, glancing at the defense table where Pierce glowered. Then she pressed on, voice faltering. "When the Army notified me Declan was missing, not confirmed dead, Pierce insisted we interpret it as a near-certain death. He said we should expedite the life insurance claim. He had insider knowledge. We filed paperwork stating Declan was KIA, forging certain confirmations, and we got the payout." In halting detail, she described each step: how they rushed a funeral, how Pierce manipulated the timeline, how they started spending the money immediately. Her voice cracked when she recounted the night Declan returned. "I saw him standing there in the house. I realized what we'd done was unforgivable." Blackwell had her confirm crucial points: forging the official death certificate, colluding with unscrupulous insurance employees, celebrating the check. Each confession hammered new nails into Pierce's coffin. Then it was Genevieve Parks's turn to cross-examine Emily. The tension spiked. Parks: "Mrs. Hawthorne, isn't it true you fabricated or exaggerated Pierce's role to secure a plea deal for yourself?" Emily's voice shook. "No, I'm telling the truth." Parks pressed. "You claim Pierce orchestrated everything, but you could have refused. Doesn't this show you were just as culpable?" Emily winced. "I was complicit, yes. I'm not denying that. But he had all the connections. He told me this was standard procedure and that we had to act quickly to protect the money." Parks gave a mocking snort. "You want the jury to believe you were a naive pawn?" Emily's eyes flicked to Declan in the gallery, then back to Parks. "I believe my husband was dead. That's not an excuse, just an explanation of how I let Pierce manipulate me." Some jurors looked sympathetic, others wore skeptical frowns. But the overarching picture was clear. Emily was indeed guilty, yet she painted Pierce as the puppet master. For the legal case, that hammered the final wedge into the defense's argument of no wrongdoing. During a midday recess, Emily hovered in a hallway corner. Pierce, ignoring warnings from his counsel, cornered her. His eyes burned with fury. "You lying snake!" he hissed. You're burying me to save your own skin." Emily's eyes brimmed with tears. "It's the truth, Pierce. You told me to lie to the army, to everyone." Pierce's face twisted. "We did it together. Don't pretend you're innocent." Emily's chin quivered. "I'm not innocent. But you exploited my grief from day one. You said Declan wasn't coming back." A U.S. Marshal moved in, warning them to separate. Pierce stormed off, cursing under his breath. Emily slumped against the wall, her guilt-laden heart pounding. She realized she'd crossed a line from which there was no return. That evening, after court adjourned, Declan retreated to the empty house of his friend Mac, where he'd been staying. He stared at the battered duffel bag, holding the remnants of his old uniform's patches, medals. Memories of Emily once lovingly kissing each medal before stowing them away in a drawer overwhelmed him. He sat on the bed, head in his hands. God, how did everything fall apart like this? He recalled the day he got word from the army that Emily had filed for his death benefits. The shock, the betrayal. Now, after listening to her break down in court, some vestigial piece of him wanted to find empathy. But the rational soldier in him insisted. She was as guilty as Pierce, if on a lesser scale. He resolved to see this through. Tomorrow the trial would continue, likely culminating in closing arguments soon. He only prayed the jury saw the truth behind Pierce's manipulations. As for Emily's fate, he kept his heart steeled whatever the court decided. He wouldn't intervene on her behalf. On day 3, the prosecution introduced a bombshell. They'd obtained text messages from Pierce's phone, courtesy of the insurance firm's internal compliance. These messages, dated prior to the official confirmation of Declan's death, indicated Pierce telling Emily, "Army's slow, but we can push it as certain. Let me handle the forms. We'll be rich." The final nail in the coffin. Genevieve Parks mounted a last-ditch rebuttal, claiming the texts were taken out of context. But the jury's faces showed the growing sense that Pierce Lennox was indeed the architect of a grand deception. At last, the moment of closing arguments arrived. Blackwell, for the government, systematically outlined each piece of damning evidence. The quick claim payout, audio recordings, text messages, multiple victim testimonies, and Pierce's attempt to frame Declan. Blackwell hammered the podium. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This isn't a case of just believing the Army's word. It is a methodical, profit-driven betrayal. A betrayal of our soldiers, of trust, of the very system meant to support grieving families." Then Genevieve Parks rose for her final stand. She paced, addressing the jury with a veneer of confidence. "Do not let sentiment cloud your judgment. Pierce Lennox facilitated what he believed to be legitimate claims. The Army's own documents referred to Captain Hawthorne as presumed dead. My client cannot be held criminally responsible for the Army's tragic error." She pivoted to pointing out Emily's cooperation deal, painting it as suspicious. "Emily Hawthorne is rewriting history to shift blame to Pierce. Ask yourselves who truly gained from that $1 million. Some jurors frowned, considering her words, but the combined evidence was overwhelming. Parks's argument rang hollow, especially after the attempted warehouse frame-up was introduced. When the jury withdrew to deliberate, the air in the courtroom felt electric. Hours passed. Tension soared. Declan remained stoic, seated next to Rachel. Emily, trembling, confided to her own attorney that she feared the worst. Pierce sat with a clenched jaw, occasionally whispering furiously to Genevieve. Ramon approached Declan quietly. "They'll come back soon, I bet. The evidence is too solid for a long debate." Declan nodded. "I hope so. I'm done waiting." In the gallery, Carmen Morales waited, clasping her hands in silent support. Tamara and Gloria, the other victims, also watched anxiously. At last, near sunset, word came. The jury had reached a verdict. Everyone reassembled in the hushed courtroom. The jurors filed in, avoiding eye contact with either side. Judge Clemens surveyed the scene, then asked the foreperson to read the verdict. Foreperson, a middle-aged woman with resolute features, stood, voice steady. On the charge of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, we find the defendant, Pierce Lennox, guilty. On the charges of insurance fraud related to Captain Declan Hawthorne's policy, we find the defendant, Pierce Lennox, guilty. On the charges of attempted obstruction of justice and framing Captain Hawthorne, we find the defendant, Pierce Lennox, guilty. Each pronouncement struck the courtroom like a thunderbolt. Pierce's face drained of color, eyes wide in disbelieving horror. Genevieve Parks maintained a rigid mask, but tension radiated from her posture. Then the foreperson continued, "We, the jury, also find that defendant Emily Hawthorne, as a co-conspirator, is guilty on the main count of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. She faced lesser charges than Pierce, but it was still a guilty verdict. A ripple of reaction spread. Emily sank into her seat, tears sliding down her cheeks. She'd known it was coming, yet hearing it out loud turned her stomach. The gallery stirred some tears, some grim satisfaction, especially among the victim families. Declan Hawthorne let out a long breath, relief flooding him. Justice. After all those harrowing months, the system had worked. Judge Clemens thanked the jury and set a date for sentencing. She ordered Pierce and Emily to remain out on bond under strict supervision, but with passports surrendered, no chance to flee. Pierce muttered under his breath, "This isn't over." But the bailiff swiftly shushed him. Court adjourned. The swirl of press and commotion erupted in the hallway. Stepping outside the courtroom, reporters bombarded Declan with questions. Rachel shielded him with a statement that the verdict speaks for itself, and Captain Hawthorne hopes this brings closure. A short distance away, Pierce stood cornered by a cluster of cameras, denying wrongdoing even as the bailiff signaled him to step back. Emily kept her head down, heading for a side exit with her attorney. Carmen approached Declan, gently touching his arm. "I'm so relieved. You got them." Declan's expression softened. "Couldn't have done it without you." He gave her a grateful nod. In that moment, he glimpsed Emily slipping out a side door. Their eyes briefly met his, full of cold finality, hers, a mixture of sorrow and acceptance. Then she was gone. Though the jury's verdict ended the trial phase, sentencing loomed. The question remained. How many years would Pierce Lennox and Emily Hawthorne face behind bars, or in Emily's case, if she might receive a more lenient arrangement due to her deal? Declan closed his eyes, pushing away the emotional storm. He was no longer a victim, but a survivor who had exposed a deep betrayal. Whatever came next, he intended to reclaim his life on his own terms. Chapter 10. 3 weeks passed between the guilty verdict and the scheduled sentencing hearing. During that interim, the attorneys submitted memorandums arguing for or against harsh punishments. The U.S. Attorney's Office emphasized the gravity of Pierce's repeated frauds and attempted obstruction, seeking 25 years in federal prison. For Emily, they recommended a lesser but still substantial penalty, perhaps 10-15 years, because she directly facilitated the fraud, but her cooperation might reduce it further. Declan tried to find solace in the quiet corners of life, visiting the graves of fallen comrades from his unit, reacquainting himself with old friends. Media attention remained intense. Some lauded him as a heroic whistleblower, while a sensationalistic gossip site ran stories about his broken marriage. He found it exhausting, but he pressed on, determined to see sentencing through. Meanwhile, Pierce Lennox existed in a grim twilight. On bail, but electronically monitored, he was confined to a run-down apartment after losing his assets. His sleek suits and luxurious condo were gone, seized to help repay victims. Genevieve Parks visited him often to discuss appeals, but the success chances were slim. One night, alone with a half-empty whiskey bottle, Pierce stared at a battered photo of him and Declan in high school. In the snapshot, they both looked carefree, arms slung around each other in a show of genuine brotherhood. He clenched his fists, tears pricking his eyes for the first time in years. "Why'd you have to come back, man?" he whispered to the shadows, bitterness and regret tangling in his chest. "We were unstoppable if you had just stayed dead." His phone sat silent. No allies, no friends, just the looming threat of decades behind bars. In a moment of rage, he flung the photo against the wall, the frame splintering. He cursed the day he decided to exploit Declan's presumed death, but there was no turning back. He'd lost. Emily Hawthorne spent her days in a small apartment, courtesy of a cousin who pity-housed her. She checked in daily with probation officers, abiding by the strict terms. Her plea deal guaranteed some downward adjustment in sentencing, but how much? She oscillated between guilt, dread, and fleeting hope that maybe she wouldn't lose everything. The final sentencing memorandum from the prosecutors arrived at her attorney's desk. They suggested a maximum of 10 years, but recognized her cooperation. Her attorney believed the final number might be closer to 57 years in prison plus restitution. Emily wept at the thought of half a decade or more locked away. Yet she told herself she deserved it for betraying Declan so completely. Ramon Alvarez, never one to rest idle, took advantage of the lull before sentencing to tie up loose ends. He connected with the FBI's continuing investigation into other fraudulent cases linked to Pierce's methods. It turned out at least half a dozen families might have been shortchanged or coerced into incorrectly finalizing death documents. The authorities expressed gratitude for Ramon's and Declan's assistance in shining a light on the scam. "It's not just about punishing Pierce," Ramon told an FBI liaison. "We have to ensure future soldiers' families aren't exploited." The agent nodded. "We'll push for reforms in how insurance claims are processed for MIA cases. Guarantee they're not rushed unless absolutely certain." Ramon left that conversation, feeling a measure of pride. He and Declan had done more than settle personal grudges. They'd sparked a change that might help thousands of military families in the long run. This was the silver lining of the whole ordeal. A day before the sentencing hearing, Rachel arranged a private meeting with Declan at her office. He arrived wearing a casual jacket, a subtle heaviness in his step. Rachel offered a seat. "How are you holding up?" Declan shrugged. "Relieved it's almost over. Anxious about final closure." She nodded sympathetically. "You've been through hell. Listen, I want to prepare you. Tomorrow's hearing might get emotional. Pierce or Emily might address the court in last statements." Declan's face hardened. "They've already said enough?" Rachel gave a half smile. "True, but keep calm. The judge might also ask if you have any statement. It's optional, but survivors or victims sometimes speak about the impact." He considered it, exhaling. "Yeah, I have some things to say." She patted his shoulder. "Then say them. Let the record show exactly what they took from you. Just do it with dignity. You're not stooping to their level." Declan met her gaze, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Rachel. For everything." Morning arrived, cold and gray. The same courthouse steps that once bustled with a throng were quieter today. Sentencing drew fewer media folks than the actual trial. Still, some cameras lingered, snapping shots of the main players. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere felt grim. Judge Clemens presided with a stern expression. Sentencing was one of her weighty responsibilities. Federal marshals stood along the walls. Pierce and Emily were escorted to the defense table, no longer free to roam. They each wore plain business attire, overshadowed by the knowledge that they'd likely leave in custody. Assistant U.S. Attorney Blackwell rose and laid out the government's stance. Your Honor, the scale of this scheme was substantial. Mr. Lennox not only defrauded insurance, but manipulated multiple families, culminating in a heinous attempt to frame Captain Hawthorne. We recommend 25 years in federal prison to reflect the gravity and deter future such crimes. As for Ms. Hawthorne, we acknowledge her cooperation. Yet she directly participated in defrauding her own husband's policy. We recommend at least 10 years, subject to her cooperation credit. His tone was firm, detailing how they also sought restitution from both defendants to repay the illicitly gained funds, plus fines. Genevieve Parks stood next, representing Pierce in sentencing arguments. She attempted to paint him as a once-respected insurance broker with no prior criminal record, who succumbed to poor judgment under personal and financial pressures. She pleaded for a lighter sentence, no more than 10 years. A hush fell when she tried to blame systemic Army flaws again, but the judge's expression remained impassive. Then Marshal Keating spoke for Emily. He emphasized her remorse, her guilt-ridden cooperation, stating that she too was victimized by Pierce's manipulative tactics. He asked the judge for leniency, suggesting a range of 35 years. Emily, tears streaking her cheeks, kept her head lowered. She felt every word of her wrongdoing weigh on her heart, though she hoped the judge might see that she was not the prime mover. Judge Clemens then invited any victims who wished to speak. Several rose. Gloria Adams and Tamara Nguyen tearfully recounted how Pierce's predatory approach left them in financial distress. Another widow, newly discovered by the FBI, described how he coerced her to sign forms, while her soldier's status was uncertain. Finally, the judge looked at Declan Hawthorne, still seated in the gallery. Captain Hawthorne, do you wish to address the court? Declan stood, buttoning his jacket. Each footstep reverberated in the silent courtroom as he approached the podium. From the corner of his vision, he noticed Emily trembling, Pierce glaring. Your Honor, Declan began, voice steady but thick with emotion, I joined the army to serve my country. I risked my life in Syria, got badly wounded, and fought to return home. The day I arrived, I found the two people I trusted most. My wife and my best friend were already cashing in on my presumed death. They took what was meant to support the families of real fallen soldiers. They turned my memory into a payday. And even after I came back, Pierce tried every underhanded tactic to bury me for real. I stand here today not just for myself, but for the men who actually died in that ambush, for every soldier who might go missing, and for every family that deserves honest treatment. Pierce Lennox destroyed the friendship we once had. Emily Hawthorne destroyed our marriage and our future. I only ask this court to show them that actions have consequences. Let them feel the weight of what they did. Let no soldier's family fear this kind of betrayal again. He paused, scanning the silent room. Then he returned to his seat, heartbeat pounding. Rachel offered a subtle nod, pride evident in her eyes. Judge Clemens turned to Pierce first. Mr. Lennox, do you have anything to say before I pass sentence? Pierce stood, knuckles white against the defense table. He exhaled, struggling to regain composure. For a fleeting moment, it seemed he might express regret. Instead, he spat out a bitter tirade. I was a businessman, Your Honor, just doing what the system allowed. Hawthorne wasn't supposed to come back. The Army declared him KIA. This fiasco is on them. I regret trusting that incompetent bureaucracy. Now I'm scapegoated. A collective ripple of disbelief spread. Even some of his own attorneys looked aghast. Pierce's words confirmed the judge's suspicion that he accepted no personal responsibility. Judge Clemens pursed her lips, giving him a tight nod. So noted. Next, she asked Emily. Pale, eyes red, Emily stood, voice quavering. "Your Honor, I'm deeply sorry for betraying my husband and for participating in this fraud. I know it's too late to undo the harm I caused. I can only promise to accept punishment and hope one day to make amends. I let fear and greed blind me." She broke off, tears coursing down her cheeks. Judge Clemens's face remained neutral, but perhaps saw a glimmer of genuine remorse. Declan listened quietly, fighting a swirl of emotions. Her apology wasn't for him to accept. It was for the law to weigh. Judge Clemens drew in a measured breath, scanning the paperwork before her. "In determining sentences, I consider multiple factors: the nature of the offenses, the defendant's roles, and any mitigating circumstances, including cooperation. Mr. Lennox, you orchestrated a wide-ranging fraud scheme, repeatedly exploited families, attempted to frame a man for a crime, and showed minimal remorse. I hereby sentence you to 22 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution to the defrauded families, including Captain Hawthorne, and a fine reflecting the magnitude of your scheme." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Pierce's knees almost buckled. Genevieve Park's expression was grim. 22 years was close to the maximum. The severity hammered home the judge's stance. Then the judge faced Emily, whose entire body shook with anticipation. "Miss Hawthorne, you aided and abetted the fraud, forging documents and accepting funds. However, you also cooperated, providing critical evidence that dismantled Mr. Lennox's broader operation. Your remorse appears genuine. Therefore, I sentence you to 7 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release, and order restitution proportional to your role in the stolen funds." Emily's sob was audible. She slumped, nodding through tears. It was more than she hoped, but less than the 10 years originally sought, thanks to her cooperation. "Court is adjourned," Judge Clemens concluded. "May justice be served." The gavel struck. It was done. Pierce was immediately taken into custody, whisked away in handcuffs. He shot a final, venomous glare at Declan. Emily, too, was led out by marshals, though less forcibly, as her cooperation deal softened her exit. She cast a tearful glance at Declan, wanting to speak, but the marshals prevented any direct contact. Gloria, Tamara, and the other victimized widows hugged each other, relief brightening their expressions. Carmen dabbed her eyes. Rachel and Ramon both wore looks of satisfaction. The tension that had weighed heavily for months finally lifted. Declan stood still, absorbing the outcome. He felt no triumph, only a somber sense of justice served. The people who stole his life for profit would pay with their freedom. But the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain. He knew that. Outside the courthouse, a small contingent of reporters pressed for statements. Rachel fielded them. Justice prevailed today. Captain Hawthorne is grateful the court recognized the magnitude of this betrayal and acted accordingly. Declan offered no lengthy interview, just a brief acknowledgement that the legal system worked. One reporter asked, "Captain Hawthorne, do you forgive your wife?" He paused, faint sorrow flickering across his face. "That's between me and my conscience," he replied quietly. "But she's facing the consequences she chose." With that, he slipped away, leaving the cameras behind. In a discreet side hallway, a U.S. Marshal allowed Emily a moment to speak with Rachel, though not with Declan. Emily's eyes were puffy, face etched with regret. Emily's voice quivered. "Tell Declan I'm sorry truly, and I accept that I deserve this." Rachel gave a tight nod, unsure if it would mean anything to Declan. "I'll pass the message, though I'm not sure how he'll respond." Emily sighed, shoulders sagging. Without further words, she let the marshals guide her away to begin her 7-year sentence. By mid-afternoon, the courthouse had emptied. Declan found himself alone in one of the corridors, the echo of his footsteps reminding him of a soldier pacing a deserted battlefield. He paused at a window, watching the last of the media vans drive off. Pierce would vanish into a prison cell for over 2 decades. Emily would serve her time, too. It felt final, and yet the ache in his chest remained. Was there closure for betrayal of this magnitude? Maybe not, but at least the threat was neutralized, the crime punished, and other families spared from further harm. He stepped out into the crisp air, inhaling deeply. A new chapter beckoned. For the first time in months, he had no immediate war to fight over there or here at home. Chapter 11. In the weeks following the sentencing, Declan Hawthorne began the painstaking process of rebuilding. The dead man had to reinstate many aspects of civilian identity bank accounts, credit, property deeds. The Army eventually restored his official status, awarding back pay and clarifying benefits. He donated a portion to funds supporting families of MIA soldiers, hoping to honor those who never made it home. His old house, once taken over by Emily and Pierce, underwent legal repossession. For a while, he considered selling it. Too many sour memories haunted the place. But Carmen Morales, his ever-watchful neighbor, convinced him to keep it, if only to prove that he'd reclaimed what was rightfully his. Carmen. Turn it into something positive, Declan. Let it be a sign that you outlasted their betrayal. He hesitated, but agreed to renovate. The interior was gutted, removing every trace of Pierce's touches. Fresh paint, new furniture, a new beginning. Painful, yes, but also cathartic. At times, he worked alone, hammering nails or scraping old wallpaper, listening to the echo of footsteps in rooms once shared with Emily. Each tier of wallpaper felt like shedding old illusions. Letters poured in from fellow soldiers and veterans who resonated with Declan's plight. Some thanked him for exposing a potential system-wide flaw that allowed unscrupulous brokers to declare soldiers dead for quick payouts. Others simply extended brotherly love, acknowledging his resilience. Sergeant Frey, the friend who testified on his behalf, visited from Texas. They shared a quiet moment in the newly renovated living room. Frey. Proud of you, Captain. This might be the first time the system saw just how easily MIA statuses can be exploited. You changed something real. Declan offered a faint smile. Wish it never happened, but if it saves others, that's worth it. They raised a bottle of beer in silent toast, an unspoken acknowledgement of the men who truly didn't come home. Despite the legal victory, Declan wrestled with an overwhelming emptiness. The woman he once loved sat in prison. The best friend he once trusted would be locked away for decades. The carefully constructed illusions of his former life had shattered. One late night, he found an old photo album in a storage box. Pictures of him and Emily smiling at their wedding, dancing at a friend's reception. Nostalgia cut him to the bone, memories of hope and promise twisted by betrayal. Yet, he refused to let bitterness define him. He folded the photos away, determined to move forward unencumbered. At a broader level, the ripple effects of Declan's case prompted significant discussion in military and insurance circles. The new Morrison Protocol, a reference to the original plan from the older story but rebranded here as an official policy, was drafted by a coalition of defense officials and insurance regulators to tighten the verification process for MIA soldier death benefits. It ensured more thorough checks before payouts, mandatory waiting periods unless conclusive evidence existed, and criminal penalties for brokers who circumvented these checks. Though the official name might differ, some wanted to call it the Hawthorne Protocol to honor Declan's specific case. The impetus was clear. Never again would families sign a rushed death claim without exhaustive confirmation. A press release read, Inspired by the unscrupulous conduct revealed in the Hawthorne-Lennox fraud case, new guidelines will protect both families and the integrity of the system. Reading about these developments, Declan felt a small measure of purpose. Out of personal tragedy arose a safeguard for countless others. He couldn't bring back lost trust, but he had built a legacy that might prevent future heartbreak. 2 months into Emily's prison term, Declan started receiving letters with her return address. At first, he tossed them unopened into a drawer, but curiosity gnawed at him. On a quiet Sunday, he finally opened one. "Declan, I know I have no right to ask forgiveness, but I need you to know I think of you every day. I'm doing counseling here, trying to understand how I let this happen. Please believe me. I never meant for it to go that far. I truly believed you were gone. That doesn't excuse what I did, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I hope you find happiness someday. Emily." He read it twice, emotions swirling anger, pity, sorrow. He set it aside, uncertain if he'd reply. Over the following weeks, more letters arrived, each revealing Emily's progress in prison therapy, her regret, her acceptance that they could never return to what was. She wrote about small acts of atonement, volunteering for prison literacy programs, and urging other inmates not to repeat her mistakes. Declan never wrote back, but reading these letters gradually dulled the edge of his resentment. She was still paying for her crime, but at least she was grappling with it. One morning, Declan answered a knock at his newly refurbished front door to find Genevieve Parks, Pierce's ex-lawyer, standing there, looking somewhat contrite. Declan's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" Genevieve cleared her throat. "I'm no longer Pierce Lennox's counsel, obviously. I came by because the feds might want your help in a final restitution hearing. They're chasing more of Pierce's hidden assets. Thought you'd want to know." Declan exhaled. He had hidden assets? She gave a tight nod. Pierce was cunning. He may have stashed funds offshore. The government suspects it. They asked me to reach out, see if you had any leads from your time investigating. Declan folded his arms. "He's in prison. I'm not sure how I can help." Genevieve shrugged. "Sometimes criminals brag to those they once trusted. If you recall him mentioning accounts in the Caymans or such, it could help the restitution process." He considered it. Pierce had boasted about retirement funds in the Caribbean, but never gave specifics. "I'll share what I remember," Declan said tersely. "But don't expect miracles." As she turned to leave, she paused. "For what it's worth, Captain Hawthorne, I misread the depth of Pierce's guilt. I believed I was defending a flawed but mostly honest man. Turns out I was wrong. I regret the part I played in smearing you." Declan studied her a moment, then gave a curt nod. "We all make choices. Some just cost more than others." The conversation ended there. Pierce Lennox, inmate number 57193, found prison life a nightmare. Initially, he tried to maintain a veneer of superiority, but hardened inmates saw through him. He was a non-violent white-collar criminal, often an easy target. The system offered him no respect. Genevieve's words about an appeal vanished once it became clear his conviction was airtight. 22 years loomed, possibly less with good behavior, but still a significant portion of his life. Occasionally, in a spasm of longing, he'd recall the days he was Declan's friend. They'd talk about business ventures after the army. He'd stifle sobs in his bunk, cursing fate, cursing his own greed. Letters to Emily went unanswered, her own sentence overshadowed any loyalty. He was truly alone. With renovations complete, Declan decided to host a housewarming get-together, a symbolic reclaiming of his home. Carmen, Ramon, Rachel, Gloria, Tamara, and a few army friends arrived on a sunny weekend afternoon. The living room felt bright, the walls painted in warm earth tones, a stark contrast to its old, haunted look. Carmen handed him a plate of homemade cookies. "Look at this place. You'd never guess the memories it holds." Declan offered a grateful smile. "Took a lot of scrubbing, physically and mentally." Ramon gave Declan a friendly punch on the shoulder. "You old ghost. You've come a long way since that night you called me from a payphone." Rachel raised a glass of lemonade. "To new beginnings." As they chatted and laughed, a sense of closure threaded through the air. They were survivors of a grim saga, now forging new paths. Declan felt a cautious but genuine sense of peace. Weeks later, an official Department of Defense ceremony recognized individuals who aided in exposing fraudulent claims. Declan received a small plaque, an unassuming accolade, but it carried weight. It represented the system's acknowledgement that his ordeal saved others from exploitation. In the brief acceptance speech, he said, "I accept this on behalf of every soldier declared missing. May the new protocols protect families, ensuring no one profits from uncertain tragedies." The applause was warm, if subdued. Later, an insurance industry representative approached him, inquiring if he'd consider consulting to help refine anti-fraud measures. Declan was taken aback. He never imagined working in that sector. He told them he'd think about it. For now, he wanted time to heal, to live quietly, without perpetual conflict. One evening, Declan sat alone on his freshly built back porch, gazing at the sunset. A gentle breeze rustled the trees. He cradled a cup of coffee, letting memories drift. The grief of losing trust in Emily no longer cut as sharply, replaced by a resigned acceptance. In prison, she'd hopefully find the chance to reflect. She wasn't a monster, just a person who made monstrously bad choices. As for Pierce, Declan tried not to dwell on him. The courts had done their job, and Pierce had 22 years to confront his own demons. Dwelling on it wouldn't give Declan any further satisfaction. He mumbled to the evening sky, "I'm alive. I made it home. That's enough." Inside, his phone buzzed. Another text from a soldier he once served with, congratulating him on the result, wishing him well. He typed a brief, heartfelt reply, then rose to watch the final burst of color on the horizon. Tomorrow he might plan a road trip, or maybe just enjoy a lazy day. The war, at least this war, was over. Chapter 12. A decade slipped by, bringing both subtle and monumental shifts to Declan's world. Scars softened, regulations improved, and new lives found their footing in the aftermath of betrayal. Now, in his early 40s, Declan Hawthorne had matured into a quietly influential figure, though he never sought the spotlight. As time marched on, part of him realized that the greatest revenge was to live fully and freely, unburdened by the chains of the past. In the intervening years, he'd taken up part-time consulting for the insurance industry, focusing on verifying MIA cases. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave him a sense of purpose. He'd also participated in veteran support groups, helping fellow soldiers transition back into civilian life, sharing his story as a cautionary tale about trust, resilience, and the bureaucracy that sometimes fails. The Hawthorne Protocol, the final name chosen, was fully implemented, drastically reducing fraudulent claims across the board. 5 years after the trial, Declan, along with Ramon Alvarez and a small veteran charity group, visited northern Syria for a humanitarian mission, helping rebuild communities ravaged by war. While there, Declan reunited briefly with Commander Berat, the Kurdish fighter who once saved him. Their embrace was quiet, respectful, two men who survived deadly chaos. Berat, through a translator, marveled, "You have come a long way, Captain. both on the battlefield and beyond. Declan nodded. I owe it to the people who helped me, and to the promise that I'd make it home for a reason. It was a poignant, full circle. The land that nearly claimed his life was now a place where he offered aid and hope. 7 years after her sentencing, Emily was released on good behavior. She left prison older, humbled, carrying an emotional weight of regrets. She moved to another state to start anew, working a modest job at a non-profit that helped reformed inmates transition to society. Eventually, she wrote one last letter to Declan. Declan, I'm out now. I'm staying clear, trying to build a life that won't repeat my mistakes. I know you owe me nothing, but I wanted you to know that prison changed me. I volunteer daily, trying to repay a fraction of what I took from you, and from the families we hurt. For whatever it's worth, I'm sorry for every lie, every bit of pain. If you ever want to talk or just need closure, I'll be here. If not, I understand. Take care, and may you find peace. He read it, heart steady. The anger that once burned fiercely was replaced by acceptance. He didn't reply, but neither did he tear it up. He filed it with the others, a testament to how far they both traveled from that catastrophic night of betrayal. Pierce remained incarcerated. Reports suggested he endured health issues, possibly from stress and prison violence. He rarely received visitors. No family came forward to support him. Rumors floated that he tried and failed an appeal, adding more bitterness to his existence. Some said he joined a prison Bible study group, clinging to any sense of belonging. But public interest in him waned. Declan occasionally wondered if Pierce ever felt genuine remorse. But the question no longer kept him awake at night. Justice had run its course, leaving Pierce to confront the emptiness of his own making. Carmen Morales, the neighbor who bravely recorded the crucial porch cam footage, became a local hero in the neighborhood association. She organized community watch programs and founded a small scholarship for kids of fallen or missing soldiers. At a small ceremony, the city recognized her for outstanding civic contribution. She invited Declan to speak at the event, and he delivered a brief reflection on how one neighbor's vigilance helped topple a web of deceit. Carmen beamed, hugging him afterward. Who'd have thought an old busybody like me could make such a difference? Declan smiled warmly. You changed everything. Thank you. In an organic progression of life, Declan opened his heart again. Over the years, he formed a quiet friendship with a counselor named Alicia, who volunteered at a veteran support group. She possessed a gentle empathy and a deep respect for his experiences. Slowly, friendship turned into companionship and eventually, love. They married in a simple ceremony at a lakeside retreat, far from the media glare. Surrounded by a handful of close friends, Ramon, Rachel, Carmen, they exchanged vows that recognized the scars of the past but looked forward to a future built on honesty and respect. Alicia never tried to replace Emily's role in Declan's story. She simply offered a new chapter, one free of betrayal. A few years later, they welcomed a child, a bright-eyed daughter named Hope. The name symbolized everything they'd fought for and everything they believed in. On lazy Saturday mornings, Declan played with Hope in their sunlit yard, sometimes marveling at how life circles back to peace after the darkest storms. Rachel Myers thrived post-trial, becoming a sought-after attorney in military law. She occasionally consulted with government agencies drafting reforms for soldier benefit protections. Her success soared, but she remained grounded, visiting Declan and Alicia for dinner now and then, always championing the cause of truth in legal forums. Ramon Alvarez formed a small investigative firm specializing in anti-fraud measures, employing ex-law enforcement and veterans. He occasionally teased Declan about joining, but Declan politely declined, content with his calmer life. Yet, they stayed in close contact, celebrating birthdays, playing poker nights, reminiscing about the bizarre twists of the entire ordeal. By the 10th anniversary, the Hawthorne Protocol had become standard across multiple insurers dealing with military policies. Incidents of fraudulent MIA or KIA claims plummeted. Mandatory second verification steps were introduced, ensuring no soldier's spouse or friend could replicate Pierce's cunning. A series of disclaimers, site visits, and official Army sign-offs were now required. The industry credited Captain Declan Hawthorne's case for shining a glaring spotlight on the gap. On a crisp autumn day, a large insurance conference invited Declan as a keynote speaker. He felt ambivalent about addressing a crowd of executives, but he recognized the value of sharing his story. Under the bright stage lights, he recounted the dire consequences of letting greed overshadow integrity. Declan concluded, "If you remember nothing else, remember that behind every policy is a real person, a family, a life. Don't let your systems or profits overshadow the duty to protect them." A standing ovation followed. Many approached him afterward, shaking his hand, assuring him of their commitment to uphold the new standards. Late one evening, after putting his young daughter to bed, Declan sat on his porch. Alicia brought him a cup of tea, placing a gentle kiss on his forehead before retreating indoors to give him a moment alone. The sky sparkled with stars, reminiscent of the desert nights in Syria, where he once lay, battered but unbroken. He remembered how he clung to thoughts of Emily to survive the ambush, ironically forging the strength that would ultimately see him through a betrayal he never imagined. It was an odd symmetry her memory saved him, yet her betrayal almost destroyed him. But in the end, he had forged a new life, one shaped by perseverance and redemption. He hoped Emily found some semblance of peace, far away in her new life. He whispered into the night, "I made it, Martinez. I made it home." He envisioned the fallen men from his unit, their faces in the flickering memory, saluting him from beyond. The hush of the night enveloped him, not with loneliness, but with a serene acknowledgement that he'd honored their sacrifice. He'd built something worthy out of the wreckage. In that moment, the gentle hum of crickets and distant headlights from the road lulled him into a sense of calm. A single tear might have escaped his eyes, neither purely sad nor purely joyful, just human. He thought of the countless veterans who overcame battles overseas only to face unseen battles at home. He silently prayed they'd find their own measure of justice and peace. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, letting the dark Virginia sky wrap him in its comforting blanket. The war was over, the verdict was passed, and the future lay open, shining with promise. Betrayal had not won. Declan Hawthorne was free. Hey, listeners of Temptress Cheating Tales!